Good evening and welcome to the July 8th, 2024 City Council Roundtable meeting. I am Mayor Ross, and tonight's meeting is brought to you live using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. And tonight's recording will be posted on the city's YouTube channel. Welcome to everyone and thank you for joining us. City Clerk Dean, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Benson. Councilmember Watton. Councilmember Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Washington. Councilmember Cotton. I'm here. Councilmember Christensen. Here. Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Mayor Russ.
I am here. And Councilmember Benson is asked to be excused, and Councilmember Watton will try to join us on Zoom. And so should we go ahead and excuse both of them in case?
Move to excuse.
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and second by Councilor Christensen to excuse Councilor Benson and Watton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And they are excused, and Councilor Washington has joined us. So thank you. First item of business is to approve the agenda. Council may have a motion to approve the agenda, and this is just for the roundtable only.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Johnson to approve the agenda. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And the agenda is approved. So our special business tonight is AB 24-075, the 2025 to 2030 non-utilities capital improvement plan discussion. Finance Director Drew Boutte, will you please lead us in the discussion?
All right, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Happy to be up here again. Just a moment as I set up. So tonight we're going to be discussing the 2025 through 2030 capital improvement plan. The reason for this is primarily because council tabled the proposed agenda bill at the last council meeting overall. Subsequent to that, we've had discussions at the F&A committee, and we've brought options. And these options are going to reflect some of that discussion that took place at that council meeting approximately 2 weeks ago. And so we're just going to kick it off with a little discussion here. Council approved a motion to delay the community center expansion project. The motion that I heard was move the project from 25 to 26. However, as a result of that, the motion was a little confusing because it doesn't quite account for the portion of the project that has been budgeted for 24 and therefore has not been included in the 25 through 2030 CIP. And so because of that confusion, we brought to council 3 options. Those 3 options are represented in these 11 by 17 size sheets that you have before you tonight overall. And we'll be kind of summarizing that as a part of this presentation, what you're going to see in those sheets. All of them relate to the community center. So the other projects haven't changed. Really, this is just kind of a focus on the community center and how that's going to influence the CIP moving forward. In addition to that, I believe that the city attorney may get involved a little bit when it comes to this, but we did table that motion. To table that motion back then 2 weeks ago at the last council meeting for the most part. And so not only is there some confusion about making sure that we move 24 as well as 25, but then potentially if there's a motion to amend that previous agenda bill itself, and then you table the agenda bill, what takes place then? So what happened to the baby dinosaur? And we'll be getting into that a little bit as we move forward, probably throughout this presentation as well. So I just want to kind of go over what was originally proposed in the community center expansion project. The total project budget was $28.92 million. Of that, we are anticipated to fund that through a one-time sales tax revenue equal to 10.5, a real estate excise tax revenue equal to 9.7, a YMCA contribution of 2.5, and we'll be kind of getting into that YMCA contribution as we move through these options, as well as the Key County Aquatics grant that the city has already been awarded for $1 million. And then we also included a interim financing line of credit equal to $5.2 million. For a total funding of $28.92 million. What that was intended to buy with the original proposal was really base bid, the base bid that council saw late last year, which included a 6-lane competition pool, as well as a recreational pool with a current channel as well. In addition to that, there were other improvements around the locker rooms, others facilities as well within the community center too. So it was more than just necessarily the natatorium. It was also included some dry space as a part of that. So in terms of the options, what we're gonna, well, actually, let me go through these. So the total project budget was 2% over the previous CIP for 23-28. And then the YMCA contribution of the $2.5 million that you see there, as well as the King County Aquatics grant, was equal to roughly about 12.1% of the total project budget. So this is what you saw in your packet last year in terms of kind of just a general diagram of the 6-lane competition pool, as well as the recreational pool. And then I just mentioned the options. So we're going to be exploring with you 3 options. Option number 1 is a 1-year delay of the community center expansion project. Option number 2 is a 2-year delay of the community center expansion project. And option number 3 is a 2-year delay with a scope reduction. We'll be getting into what those 3 options kind of mean overall. In terms of option number 1, which is a 1-year delay, total project budget in this is $30.23 million. That would be supported with $11.8 million in one-time sales tax revenue, $10.3 million in real estate excise tax revenue, a reduced contribution from the Y of 1.3, a King County Aquatics grant that we received of $1 million, and then grants or other funding sources, which replaces the line of credit equal to 5.8 for a total funding of $30.23 million. As you can see, this is generally an escalation over what we've currently included because we're delaying the project by 1 year. So it's a 4.3% increase over the original 25 through 2030 community center expansion project. In addition to that, because of that reduced YMCA contribution of $1.3 million is equal to roughly 7.6% of the total project budget. And I just want to kind of go over this point, which is going to come up with the second option as well. If you were to take this $5.8 million and convert it into a bond, the bond size would be $5.8 million. So if we do happen to come back to you down the road and have that discussion, well, what would this translate into if we were to go out for a bond? Then in this situation, it would be $5.8 million. This assumes the construction of the community center would begin during the spring and summer of 2025. So in terms of closing that gap, that $5.8 million gap, we'd probably have to have that sense of what we're going to be able to generate in funding over the next 6 to 8 months or so, for the most part. Just to give you some assumptions in regards to revenues, construction would start before a potential award from King County in their aquatics facility grant program. So we're not anticipating any sort of notice from King County until September of 2025. And so if we start construction during the spring of 2025, we wouldn't have that in hand necessarily. As mentioned before, it anticipates the YMCA contributing only $1.3 million towards the project, given the lower ranking the city would receive for the youth recreational facilities grant application. The next opportunity, if we do happen not to get that, would be to reapply. To reapply would be the spring of 2026 for likely a grant award in 2027. And in addition to that, the grant, the CIP now accounts for anticipated interest revenue that wasn't included before. So that's a kind of additional element that we've added to your document that you have in front of you here today. Just to talk a little bit about the YMCA moving forward, the Youth Recreational Facility Grant, the YMCA was seeking a $1.2 million youth recreational facility grant that was applied for this year, last month. The application is scheduled for ranking by the Department of Commerce of September of this year. And any grant award would require an appropriation in the state capital budget, which means funds would not be available until the summer of 2025. So there's an entire process that they have to go through in order to get that appropriated in the state budget. The project does not anticipate the rank highly for the 25-26 biennium because the project has been pushed. Which means any grant award would likely not take place until the state's 27 through 28 biennium, which is why instead of 2.5, we've got 1.3 listed. And then just as a note on the YMCA fundraising, it doesn't really begin until the city has approved the project, primarily because people do not want to donate until the project has been approved. And so there's a bit of a chicken or the egg kind of question that comes with that, I think overall. And we also have the YMCA here. So if I'm screwing up in terms of what I'm saying, we can bring them there. To answer any of those questions. Yeah. So just to talk a little bit about the expenditure assumptions overall, it assumes a 6% increase in project cost per year. Primarily that comes directly from Apsher themselves. Also, we have reduced the amount set aside for public art to better account for ordinance 913. There's a limit in terms of how much we can actually allocate towards public art itself, which is a limit of $50,000 per project and no more than $75,000 in unaccounted or unallocated fund balance overall. And so just after checking for that ordinance, we made sure to reduce the amount set aside for public art, which is equal to roughly $280,000 reduction overall. Next, option number, well, I mentioned the YMCA component here. In terms of option number 2, the community center expansion project 2-year delay. Sorry. This includes a total project budget of $31.81 million, which is roughly equal to a 9.1% increase over the original 25 through 2030 CIP, which would be supported by one-time sales tax revenue equal to $13.3 million, real estate excise tax revenue equal to 10.5, a YMCA contribution of 1.3, King County Aquatics grant equal to $1 million, and then grant or other funding sources equal to 5.7. So for those playing at home, if you notice, 5.7 with the 2-year delay option is less than the 5.8 that you saw under the 1-year delay. And primarily that has to do with cash flow within the CIP itself. So we're going to be completing a number of projects over the next year. We don't have as many projects for 2026 necessarily. And so consequently, we'll have some cash that will free up at that time that we can then deploy towards this project to help reduce that grant or other funding sources contribution that we need. If you were to take that 5.7, and I see some eyes right there.
Wait a minute, no.
You have a question?
Yeah,
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
we have 15 point some million dollars set aside for this project out of the CIP. To add to that, due to the fact that there's less load on the CIP, that would take council action to take more of the CIP fund and put into that $15 million. I may have the number slightly wrong, but so I'm confused by the statement of just because I have less projects, I've got money that I am assuming gets thrown into this project.
Well, so this is a plan. It's a financial plan overall in which we're proposing to council to incorporate more one-time sales tax revenue as well as real estate excise tax revenue over the next 2 years in order to fund the project. So we can certainly limit it to whatever dollar amount you want in terms of a city contribution, but obviously with the increase in the cost of the project over time, the city may have to contribute more in order to maintain its distance, I would say, with the total project cost. And so
I'm concerned you've allocated money without council action. 2, I'm concerned we've artificially made the 2-year delay look cheaper as a result, which in fact it is not. But okay, this isn't an option I like anyway, so I'll shut up at that stage. I disagree with how we got to these numbers.
Councilor Washington?
Yeah, I'm also with the concern of throwing in the assumption that we just come back to the city for the money. I mean, there are other partners that we should be working with. So the assumption in this equation becomes come back to the city coffer for the difference. I got a lot of heartburn over that.
part of of the increase in the revenue is the interest that we're going to be generating over time off of just holding on to it. Secondly, we are proposing a financial plan that requires council approval. And so consequently, I don't believe that we've skipped any sort of step in the process. If you tell us to go back and actually reduce the amount that we're contributing, we're going to do that. But right now we're proposing multiple options to council at this stage for your reaction. If you want us to change it, we can certainly do so. That's your prerogative overall, and we will go and make adjustments to it.
Counselor Johnson.
But just to be clear, to get that city contribution higher, there weren't items taken out of the CIP other than the before referenced art stuff, correct? Like we didn't reduce any other projects.
No, we didn't reduce any projects from the version that you saw, the original 25 through 20 version to the one that you're seeing today.
Thank you.
There was some rebalancing of the labor, I think overall, as a result of the projects changing, because we've got to reallocate that across the board for the most part. But otherwise, you're not seeing any other changes outside of this.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
But other than the interest, you have assumed what was prior ending fund balance. Additional funds will be allocated community center under option 2.
So because of the reduced reserve requirement of this plan overall, because we're no longer forecasting a bond as a part of this, it means that we do not need to necessarily hold on to as much cash as we had under the previous proposed CIP. Which means those funds then that would have gone towards providing a reserve requirement for 1.5 times the total annual debt service is now freed up, potentially deployed towards this project here. It could certainly be allocated to other projects too, or we can maintain that within ending fund balance if that's what we're seeking as well.
Okay, but to bottom line, option 1 is, call it $29 million for a 1-year delay. Option 2 for a 2-year delay. Do these numbers still match? No, you've changed some side.
31.81.
Yeah, call it $32 million. Okay, so even though you're saying the grants and funding and whatnot go down, the overall project cost is up. Okay.
And so that unreconciled difference right now under the 2-year delay would be $5.7 million. If we do happen to require a bond at that time, your bond is actually going to be $6.8 million because we have to maintain an adequate reserve, 1.5 times total annual debt service. So eliminating the bond itself helps to actually reduce the amount required from grants or other funding sources.
And what happens to the other 2 projects that were assumed to be in the bond?
Those stay. So those have not changed. And there were 3 projects.
Okay.
Meadowbrook, the River Trail Arboretum project, and then Town Center Phase 3. So we have not adjusted any of those.
And we do not need bond to do those.
Well, so because they were previously proposed with a bond associated with those 3 projects, we haven't touched those and their required bond proceeds at all.
Counselor Christensen.
Yeah, so sorry, just to further clarify then, those 3 projects are still covered under a bond, a potential bond going
Correct.
forward, correct?
All right. So option number 2 assumes that construction of the community center would begin during the spring, summer of 2026. In terms of some key revenue assumptions, it assumes that, construction would start after a potential award from King County in their aquatics facility grant program. So ideally by the spring and summer of 2026, we'll know if we're going to get potentially $1 million out of King County in their aquatics grant program, or 4, or even more than that. And so consequently, that will give us some clarity about how much maybe that unreconciled difference would be after that period of time. Once again, it also anticipates the YMCA contributing only $1.3 million towards the project, given the lower ranking the city would receive for the YRF grant application. And the CIP, in addition, now accounts for anticipated interest revenue that was not included before. In terms of a couple of key expenditure notes overall, it assumes a 6% increase in project cost per year, and also reduces the amount set aside for public art to better account for Ordinance 913. Option number 3, which is the 2-year delay with a scope reduction, in essence takes option number 4 and really kind of starts to figure out what is the project budget for this option in particular, which really only includes a 6-lane competition pool. It really doesn't include much of anything else as a part of this, other than just what we might term just a pool in the box, or Mr. Chambliss, sorry.
City Administrator Chambliss.
So this would reduce the size of locker rooms, but some locker rooms would still be required because they're required by the building code. But it would remove any non-building code required improvements from the project.
Councillor Cotton.
Just a quick reference back to option number 2. Would that fall in the category, that 2-year delay of having to adhere to the higher standards from Department of Ecology's requirements?
City Administrator.
We attempted to get that answer this afternoon, but our building official left by the time we had our meeting, so I can get you that information in the morning. I can't provide it tonight. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I tried.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So option number 3, which includes a 2-year delay with a scope reduction, the total project budget would be equal to $27.7 million, which is a 4.4% decrease from the original 25 through 2030 CIP project. It would be funded through one-time sales tax revenue equal to $13.38 million, real estate excise tax revenue equal to $10.53 million, YMCA contribution equal to 1.3, and a King County Aquatics grant equal to $1 million. In this situation, the grants or other funding sources required would be $1.5 million. So it's less than the previous 2 options. And if you were to add up the YMCA contribution, the King County Aquatics grant, it's equal to roughly 8.3% of the total project budget. This assumes that construction of the community center, like option number 2, would begin during the spring and summer of 2026. In terms of just some key revenue assumptions, construction would start after a potential award from King County in their aquatics facility grant program. As mentioned for the previous option, once again, it anticipates the YMCA contributing only $1.3 million towards the project. And the CIP now accounts for anticipated interest revenue that was not included before. What gets interesting with this option.
You just said interesting, so you got my.
I love your reactions. Is key assumptions when it comes to expenditures. It assumes a 6% increase in project costs per year, but it also assumes an additional $1.4 million in materials and equipment to account for the new Washington State Energy Code that became effective this year, March 15th of this year. We did apply for a permit. That kind of holds us to the old energy code, but if there are adjustments to the redesign work, we'll have to incorporate that equipment and materials basically into any sort of update to the design itself. In addition, it assumes an additional $500,000 in redesign to account for the scope reduction. Also, it assumes an operating subsidy of $200,000 to account for the YMCA's interest and costs to maintain the facility relative to the anticipated increase in revenue. So I don't know if everyone saw Councilmember Johnson's questions and the response to Councilmember Johnson's questions, but the operating subsidy would have to come from the general fund basically to support that, which means your ongoing sales tax revenue, your ongoing property tax revenue would need to contribute to the YMCA in order to really maintain this facility and have it be acceptable overall. Lastly, it also, once again, reduces the amount set aside for public art to better account for ordinance 913. And so with that said, those are the 3 options in front of you. We've got multiple people here to answer any questions from staff as well as the administration. And so thank you for your time and for listening to me and for your continuing discussion.
Councillor Cotton.
And this might be a partial question too for the why, is in some of the discussions and questions, there was, and I think it was in answers to Councilmember Johnson's questions, that there would be a potential contract between the city and the school district, and that there was some kind of rental fee involved with them being able to use the facility. Does that go to the city or does that go to the Y? Any rental fees?
City's Administrator Chambliss.
Since I'm the one who typed up the confusing paragraph. What I was trying to explain was maintaining a 6-lane option, provided the option of doing that in the future. If we built a 4-lane option, we would not have that option in the future. As for how we negotiate the updated agreement with the Y, whether the money comes to the city or the Y, should the council provide negotiating direction in a venue other than open session, we would certainly take that into account for our ongoing negotiations with the Y with the updated.
Does the YMCA have any information on what they standardly, and I won't hold you to it, charge other school districts for use of the competitive pool facilities?
We have Josh Sutton from the YMCA.
Josh Sutton from the YMCA Facilities Executive. We have operating agreements with the city of Kent and the Kent School District for our YMCA in Kent, where we have 2 high schools that swim at the Kent YMCA. And as part of our operating agreement, there was funding set aside to help build the pool, but the Kent School District still pays for the cost of lifeguards during that rental time. And so I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it correlates directly to their use of the pool and the cost of us providing lifeguards for that pool. So that way we can cover those costs that come back to the YMCA.
Okay, so the rental fee comes to in Kent comes to the YMCA.
It does as part of the agreement. However, the total cost of renting the pool, some of it is subsidized because of how the city and the school district were able to come together before the agreement was written. But the cost of the lifeguards is baked into our rental agreement with the school district.
Okay.
So we receive some funds, but just direct costs, not the cost of operating the pool on a regular basis and things like that.
Okay.
Does
Yes,
that help answer your question?
yes, it does. Thank you.
Councilmember Holloway, did you have a different part of that I didn't answer? I'm sorry, sir.
No, you got it right. I was, basically you get funding for the lifeguards
That's right.
and that's it.
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly.
I mean, but I'm sorry, I
It's
don't
not a
remember a
significant
number.
dollar figure either way.
What's that?
It's not a significant dollar figure either way.
No, but it pays for its costs,
Right,
and we're
it's a
happy to
pass-through.
have the kid, those are our kids in that community swimming in that pool and we're happy to have them there.
But
So,
the school
Counselor
district,
Cotton?
I'm sorry, the school district in Kent is helping to help subsidize the pool construction.
oh, when the pool was built, the city of Kent agreed to help subsidize the cost of the pool. Because it was replacing a forward thrust pool from the 1960s. Part of that agreement included making these lanes available for the Kent School District. I can't recall whether the school district gave the city of Kent any money for that.
Okay.
That money did not come to the YMCA. But our agreement is that we rent the lanes basically for the cost of operating those lanes with the lifeguards
Thank you.
to make sure they're accessible for our kids.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Counselor Johnson?
This is also probably for the Y, honestly. So the way that we did the motion a couple weeks ago could have left an impression with someone that what the council was intending was, let's put this project on the back burner. We'll circle back to it in a couple of years and kind of see where it goes, which I don't think was the intent of the council. But someone could have interpreted it that way. If instead what we did was we refined what our intent was and made it a little bit more clear, we approved the project pending funding, then I wonder if that could affect the ranking for the YRF grant. And they would look at this as, yeah, this is a project that's moving forward. This funding would help us close that gap. And therefore we could still get those funds.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
So, and to be clear to that point, I would like to add kind of a note to this, a sub note to this, particularly on this item, that the intent is that at a time when an acceptable set of options and funding occurs to move forward with this project. Okay, I think if you apply that to option 1, hopefully that alleviates, alleviates a lot of the concerns that I don't accept for not going out and asking for grants in the near term. It leaves us the option that, again, the minute we have a set of options, acceptable options and funding that match, we can move forward. My concern of making this motion originally was I believe the intent was to move forward with this project without having the funding identified. And sorry, guys, I haven't seen that done ever. It's not good practice. Okay, but I guess I'd like to motion a note on the CIP again. Put my eyeballs back in. Intent is that at a time when an acceptable set of options and funding occurs to move forward with this project. Just put a footnote on the CIP. May I have a second?
Point of order, I guess it is.
State your point.
During our roundtables, can we make amendments and things, or do we need to wait for discussion during the main council meeting?
You just said what I was about to raise my hand and say, which is unless you've noted that you're going to take action on something related to the CIP, then it should be deferred to the regular meetings.
I defer that. I got a motion coming, just be.
Okay, thank you.
Loaded.
Councilor Christensen?
So can I have the latitude to ask a question of my fellow council member's point, just so that I can understand further what he's saying?
Yes.
So what I'm trying to understand, well, because technically we're not supposed to really be going back and forth with each other, right? It's supposed to be where one person talks, then you move down the line, whatever, right? In the form of our meetings. Roundtables, I understand a little more relaxed.
Do you always have the option to ask point of information? Go ahead.
Okay. So my question is, as we're looking at option one, right? We still have 3 or 4 projects that are included in the CIP that do call for another bond that would have to be paid for in a way that's similar to this. So I'm trying to understand the distinction of why you're comfortable going forward with the other projects that would also require a bond, as well as city money going into it at the outset. But you're making a distinction between those 3 or 4 projects and the community center expansion.
And it really goes to the intent. Man, it's okay.
Mayor
Yeah.
Pro Tem Holloway?
It really goes to the intent. If we decide to make those projects go forward, if there is a bond, that is a council decision to go do.
Mhm.
Okay, so again, the CIP commits us to nothing. It just signals intent. I wanted to make it, particularly on this project, clear. The intent was move forward when we have options and funding that match. I believe the intent coming into the conversation was to move forward regardless.
Maybe we should ask our Josh from the Y, from the right, the comment that was made earlier regarding intent. Is that in the type of wording that the Y would need in order to, that we would have higher ranking in the YRF? Or that you would go into a capital campaign based on word intent?
Hi, thanks again. Yes, wording matters. Let's start there. After the vote, a couple of weeks ago, the notice came out about the city council's meeting, and it said that the project was on a 2-year delay. That matters. That matters in Olympia right now. So as we talk about how this project moves forward, having a more specific and aggressive statement that clarifies that this project is not on hold, but that this project is moving forward pending additional funding matters, because that allows us to begin to talk about this project differently in the community. If the message is that the council has put this project on hold for 2 years, the Y will put up shop as it relates to fundraising and come back in a couple of years and do that, because the reality is no one will fund it. It's also true for your King County grant of $4 million, that how you word this matters. That's money that's out there soon. And so I've heard the question about funding identified, and I think funding's been identified. What hasn't happened is funding hasn't been fully secured. And so if you're saying that you want funding identified, I think staff have done a yeoman's job of saying, here are the potential areas where that funding can come from. If you want funding secured, then I think that you have to really think about how we phrase this next council motion when it comes time, so that we can clarify we're all in this together to go get that money. And the biggest pot of that money is the $4 million from King County that's been outlined here. So if the council adopts a resolution that is more aggressive, especially when you look at option one, I believe that the Y has the capacity to go back to Olympia with our youth recreational facilities grant and say, this project is moving forward pending additional funding. And your funding is key to that. And so I think that's important. But I think that if it's just when funding is identified, or perhaps what we really mean is when funding is secured, that's too loose and our ranking drops, especially if they see potential of spending it in the next biennium instead of in this coming state biennium. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Yes, thank you.
thank you.
Counselor Cotton?
I don't know if this is the right place. Can I ask about, because we did get some additional information from the F&A committee. And there's some. Sorry. What? You can't hear me? And that they're at the our regular session, we will be also discussing a proposal that would include the wording to be more aggressive. But I believe there was a stipulation that something to the line, and please correct me if I'm wrong, of if we had secured 95% of the funding, then the construction would go forward. Am I right in how I'm verbalizing that? Or rephrase?
So I think it says if you have 95% of the funding, then they go ahead and order some of the
The
long-term
long-term,
parts.
okay,
Because some of them take like at 1.18 months.
okay.
But
But was that funding, that 95% secured or 95% committed?
not sure.
Yes. So it turns out that we probably need to strike that line anyway, because it doesn't work with our choice of a procurement method.
Okay,
So our procurement method is all or nothing. So we say yes to it all, or we say no to it all. We can't say, oh, we got 95%, you can start ordering this stuff and then we'll do a little more later. So that line does need to be removed if you choose to use any of those words I put on the paper.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
And that is because it's a design build.
Correct.
There's an underlying assumption there that the vendor would not accept something that might save them money. So I think there's room to have discussions on that. Again, I view getting those long lead items would reduce the overall cost by some dollar figure. So I can't believe that a vendor would say, you know, it's on us to buy it. Maybe there's a breakout that says that long lead items, the city's responsible for, the vendor's not, we reduce from the price. But I think you need to go have that discussion before we close that door.
City Attorney Linehan.
I was just going to add that I think the concern behind that 95% go ahead and order long lead time items is the way the design build process works, there's a point at which the risk shifts from the city to the contractor. And that doesn't happen at 95%. That happens pursuant to the contract terms. And so I think there's potentially a mismatch of timing of when 95% of the funding would be available and when they are contractually bound to accept the risk of the project and the cost of the project. So I just think those are sort of like trying to put together two things that don't really fit under the contracting scheme. So
Counselor Johnson.
Um, shifting gears a little bit, a thought on option one and why I really like that option is it does give us time to talk to our legislators and our regional partners. And if now that we have a fully designed shovel-ready project pending funding, and the answer's still no, a year from now, I think that the answer is just going to continue to be no. So I think that picking option one allows us to really find out, are folks really interested in this project and being partners on this when we're so close? We just need that last dollar in. If the answer is still coming back as no, then yeah, I think that it's time for us to move on. So I'm really leaning toward option one. One other thing that I wanted to mention about option three that makes me nervous is about what happens with after school programming. If the district is using the facility, then their swim lessons squeeze out our programming for local people and Y members and stuff. It's kind of hard to go to a swim lesson at 1 p.m. when it's a school day. Most swim lessons happen after school. So I have some concerns about option three. There are others as well that have concerns about option three, but that's where I'm at right now.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
So those who pay for it get first use. At this stage, the school was not contributing. So they would get secondary use to the members that are signed up and paying dues. And I would let the Y manage that. In my opinion.
So I was just gonna add to the conversation that the CIP is a financial plan. It's not a budget. It's not appropriating funds for the most part. So it is adjustable, right? If things don't happen within the next year, or if they do, we can always come back sooner to amend the CIP and then amend the budget. So there's potentially a process in place today, depending on how much, right, funding pending, right, overall that we do happen to receive during the time period. So, it as kind of stipulated here for the most part, may make more sense to go with a 1-year delay with the understanding that this is a living document. It doesn't set things into stone. It is identifying funding, right, for the most part, and how we might spend that over a period of time. So we certainly don't have $40 million in the bank. And so we have to really budget for the revenue that's coming in down the road as well, particularly for the capital programs that we have over time too. And so I thought that was a really key point that Josh made. That a lot of what we're doing here is trying to identify the funding over a 6-year period. We may not necessarily have it fully secured, right, completely, but a 1-year delay helps us to try to find ways to get it more secure over time. So thank you.
Counselor Cotton.
At what point or at what level of funding secured would construction start on option one?
Well, I think from the conversation that we've been having with council, I think you want 100% secured before construction would start. I mean, with the originally proposed CIP, if you guys were to say, okay, go bring me a bond ordinance, right, tomorrow, I could do so, right? If council were to approve the bond ordinance, then I could tell you, guess what, the bank or investors are going to be giving us, $5.2 million on this date. By that time, you'll know that you've got the full funding in place by August of this year, and we can start forward. So the distinction that I'm hearing, or the importance that I'm hearing, is that council really, really wants 100% fully funded, fully secured funding, right, overall, with no bond attached to it at this point. And ideally, with a higher percentage coming from outside partners overall. That's what my takeaway points over time. And I think that's what we're trying to drive towards here.
Do we have any questions? Any questions for the Y or any additional discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
Just for clarification, what I had written on the motion that may come later was and funding occurs. Not seeks, but occurs.
Or secured?
Uh, we could argue the verb, but I think they're synonymous, at least in my head.
Counselor Johnson?
Yeah, I hope that representatives from the Y will stick around for our conversation later because I would certainly like some guidance on what they think would be strongest verbiage to get us the best deal.
Right. Anything else? Any other comments? Seeing none, we can go ahead and adjourn. So may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Johnson, second by Counselor Christensen. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? It's unanimous. And we are adjourning at 6:46 and we will be back at 7 p.m. for our council meeting. So we just completed a roundtable and we are beginning our regular meeting of the city council. The time is now 7 p.m. And let the record show that all council is present except for Councilmember Benson, who is excused. Councilor Watton, who we excused earlier, has joined us. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask Councilmember Johnson to please lead. Thank you. So our first item is to approve the agenda. Council may have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilmember Johnson. Are there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Holloway,
Move to add a closed session to the end of the agenda.
it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Christensen to add the closed session. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And that motion passes. Is there any other changes? Okay, going back to the agenda. All in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And the agenda is approved with the amendment. Next item. So tonight we celebrate Officer Dimitri Vladis' promotion to sergeant. One of the city's primary goals is to train, mentor, and develop our team members. And with this goal, we were able to, we like to promote from within. And tonight is a great example that Sergeant Vladis, thank you for your hard work and commitment to the city. And I'll invite Chief Lynch to provide an overview, and then we will do a pinning.
Thank you, council and mayor, for having us tonight. This is another big night. I've had to wear this a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, so we have big events coming this summer. And I'll be wearing it again on Thursday when we have 2 more graduates from the police academy. So we took a sergeant's exam back in January, and I had an idea of who was going to do the best on it, who was going to struggle, who was going to be mediocre. Well, it came down to 2 people, Officer Smith, who is now Sergeant Smith, and Officer Vladis were a half-point difference. And that's kind of unheard of when we test, and they're so equal. So I've known for a while that he was going to be promoted. It is a very easy decision for me to make. For the last 6 months, he has been an acting sergeant. He has taken on the duties of a supervisor with a squad that had a sergeant that was gone. And he has excelled beyond my expectations. This is somebody that has 15 years of experience in law enforcement, the last 10 with the city of Snoqualmie. He is an FTO. He is a firearms instructor. Anything that I give him and I say, hey, could you do this for me? It comes back better than I could have done myself. So when I give the sergeant stripes to somebody, I have to feel comfortable enough to go to sleep at night, thinking that they will be able to run the city of Snoqualmie, the city of North Bend, and all the officers that are working for them. And this is one that I will sleep very well, and you guys should too. I did tell him last week that he was being promoted. It was the worst kept secret because I kind of, I just didn't know when it was going to be. But we were able to surprise him last Wednesday. We called his wife Courtney and his kids to come to the station, and he thought it was an intervention when he walked in. But I gave him a memo congratulating him, and I brought it tonight. I want to just read it to you so you know exactly what I told him. Sergeant Vladis, I am pleased to extend my warmest congratulations to you on your well-deserved promotion to police sergeant. Your hard work, dedication, and leadership have set you apart, and I have no doubt that you will excel in your new role. As a sergeant, you will have the opportunity to make an even greater impact within our department. Your experience and skills will be invaluable as you take on this new challenge, and I have full confidence in your ability to lead with integrity and professionalism. I look forward to seeing the positive contributions you will continue to make to our department and the community. And your promotion is a testament to your commitment to excellence, and I am certain that you will continue to inspire and motivate those around you. And once again, congratulations on this significant achievement. So this is a very big day. Of all the jobs that I've held in law enforcement, sergeant was my favorite. And it is the most important job in the police department. It's not the chief, it's not the captain, it is the sergeant, because the way that the sergeants handle their business is the way that our police department goes. And I am entrusting Officer Vladis, now Sergeant Vladis, with that heavy burden. When you put the stripes on, the stripes only weigh a couple ounces, but it's heavy. So, and he has stepped up and shown that he's ready for it. So I'm very proud to present him to the council tonight. And with us, we have his wife and family. And if I could have Sergeant Vladis move to the front, and Mayor, if you want to come out, and we'll take some photographs and we'll do a pinning of his badge. He has not worn the sergeant's badge yet. I gave it to him last week and he's refused to put it on for bad luck. So he wanted to wait until this ceremony. So his wife Courtney will come up and pin the badge. We'll go ahead. Go ahead. Now we can get something. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Congratulations.
Sure, yes. Microphone. Really?
I want to thank Chief Lynch for allowing me this opportunity to actually wear the stripes, actually become a sergeant. I worked really hard to get to where I am today. People that work with me for a long time, they know me really well. They know where I came from. They know where I've been. They know me being here today, 30 plus years ago, into this contract with no visions. My family and I, my wife Courtney, my two boys, Liam and Dylan, we live in the community. We live in Ridge. Our boys go to school here. So this is as much of my community as anybody else's. So I want to thank everybody here, my brothers and sisters in blue. Every single person in here has played an integral part of me being here today. This was not a singular effort. This was a joint effort. It wasn't just all me. Every single person in here has pushed me, educated me, and pushed me to get to where I am today. I've learned from every single person here. So, and I'm going to continue learning, because the day we stop learning is the day we die, right? That's what we say. The biggest thanks is for my family, my wife Courtney, my boys, Liam and Dylan, because at the end of the day, when you hang up your armor, you hang up your Batman belt, They're the ones that are here to pick up the pieces, you know, so we, yeah, a hard day, or you come home, you're broken down, you hate the world. They're there to pick up those pieces and bring it back to life. So, and they're the ones that make those sacrifice, is our response. So they're the ones that sleep at home by themselves when we're out there protecting the community. They're the ones that are missing anniversaries, birthdays, parties, and all that, so. It sucks, but that's what we chose to do, right? So can't complain. I mean, I could, nobody would listen anyway. With that being said, I thank you. I am eternally grateful to be here today. Like I said, I could never envision this 30 years ago that I'll be here today and be where I am today. So my family's here, my brother-in-law is here. One of my very close friends is here, my squad's here, my brother and sisters are here. We ask them. And hope I can fill these big shoes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we do have quite a bit on the agenda tonight, so you don't have to feel obligated to stay.
Everybody runs out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. So we have a presentation this evening by the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. And we have both Maggie and Jim who are here to present.
Good evening. My name's Maggie Jonescu. I am the president of the local conference of St. Vincent de Paul. We're really here this evening to thank the city council and thank Snoqualmie for establishing the human services program. And with that program, we've able to get some funding to help our neighbors in need in Snoqualmie and the local areas. So we're members local to Snoqualmie Valley Conference. We're all volunteers. We go and we visit and see our neighbors, whether they're living in cars, apartments, eviction notices, or just need a little extra support to get by. I'm gonna introduce Jim Jordan. He's gonna talk about who we are and our society, and then I'll be talking a little later about what we've done with the grant money and what we do in general and what types of support we get.
I'm Jim Jordan. I've been a Vincentian for almost 20 years now. What I want to do is I want to talk about when, why, and who. I want you to go back to 1833 in Paris, France. Obviously, they did not have electricity. People used wood to cook and to stay warm. A man named Frederick Ozanam, who was going to Sorbonne University in Paris, saw these people struggling on the streets. So he thought, I can help these people, but I can't do it by myself. He got some of his friends at the University of Sorbonne. They called themselves a conference, and they started going out helping people. And that was the start of it, 1833 in Paris, France. They came to the United States in 1845. It's been 191 years ago that we started the St. Vincent de Paul. It came to the Valley in 1937. It came to Seattle in 1920, the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Now it's a county-wide organization that we refer people to other areas if they're not in our boundary areas. Anyway, our mission is to help the poor. And you wouldn't believe some of the things that people get themselves into. They lost their job, they have a medical problem, they're homeless or whatever. Next thing I want to talk about the growth of Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Remember back in 1833, there was one person that started it. Today, we're worldwide. We have approximately 800,000 Vincentians do what I and Maggie do around the world. We're in 150 countries around the world. My wife and I, Pat, years ago traveled to Fiji Island, and we were on the island with Suva, and we went to the cathedral, and there on the wall at the cathedral was the Office of Society of St. Vincent de Paul. We had a friend who was a member of our conference who worked for Boeing's, and he was traveling to North Vietnam. He saw the sign in Hanoi. People around the world need our help. It doesn't make a difference where you live or what situation you're in. People need help, and we're there to help them. The home visit. As I mentioned before, we see people who are struggling. And one of the requirements for St. Vincent de Paul Vincentians is to meet with people, if at all possible, in their home. We want to see them in their environment. We go to see them, we bring them compassion, we bring them help, we listen. It's a wonderful trait to be a good listener. And I've been to some of these meetings with these neighbors of ours, and the ladies, especially women, would talk an hour about their situation, and we sit there and listen to them. They need that. The St. Vincent de Paul in King County, the council in downtown Seattle, which is on 4th Avenue South, gives us a lot of resources, and that's what you see on the screen up there. There's a number of things listed that they provide us. They give us guidance. If the council or the conference is running out of funds, they can give the council or that conference some funds. The needed conference fund form is what they use. Luckily, we haven't had to do that because of you. Thank you. Next.
Types of assistance. No work or charity is foreign to the society. There's many things that we help people with. A lot of things, rent, utilities, food, clothing. We also get them in contact with people who we refer them to other agencies. We try to find them help. If a person is homeless, we give them information from King County. We give them information from Hopeland. And we provide resources so they can better their position. Excellent. Conditions encountered. So many of our neighbors find themselves in need. A lot of it though, so runaways, lack of living and wages. You know, with the minimum wage requirement is $15 per hour. That only provides $31,200 a year for a person. So many reasons. They've gotten so sick, they've had to quit their job and they end up in the hospital for long term. Then they end up homeless. Just many different opportunities and changes in people's lives. So our focus over the years, in the early years, we didn't provide much assistance, maybe $75 to $150 to help them over their current crisis. That doesn't help much with someone who's behind in their rent or facing an eviction notice. Today, with again, help from grants like yours, we're able to provide more, up to $500 right now per person per 6-month period. And that's for mainly utilities, rent, that they really need help with. We also have access with St. Vincent de Paul in Seattle, counselors. We can get people help in mental health, help also in trying to find some legal aid. There's East Side legal assistance that will help people for free. So we try to help them get through and make progress, and we try to put in place some kind of long-term change, not just we're gonna help you with your food this month and next month and next month. We try to help them figure out how they can help themselves. So, next slide. Here's some statistics, just over the course since October to September. Rent, 58%, utilities, 14%, miscellaneous, 18%, and gas, 8%. Of that, 46% went to households and families in Snoqualmie. So you can see we help in some of the different zip codes, Carnation, North Bend, Snoqualmie. We actually help Carnation all the way out to the pass. But the majority of the people we're helping are in Snoqualmie. So again, want to thank you on behalf of our neighbors for all your support. Happy to take questions at this point.
Councilor, do we have any questions for St. Vincent de Paul?
Jim wants to make one comment.
Right.
Oh, you have a question?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Councilor Washington?
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for the presentation and thank you for your service to the community. Really appreciate it. Just as kind of our community evolves and the communities in the outlying areas, where do you see the biggest need?
Where do we see the biggest need? I think a lot of it is been rent.
Mhm.
Because as post-COVID now, people are upping their rent pricing. And again, the people that are in these low income rental situations, they can't afford it. And so we're helping more and more people.
So housing.
We all know rents are going up,
Yeah.
house prices are going up. And it affects everybody who's looking to find a place to get a roof over their head. And I see people sometimes, I provide gas for them at the Shell station, North Bend, they're living in their car. Women, not only men, women are living in their cars because they can't afford a roof over their head. Thank you. One other thing I want to say, years ago, probably about 15 years ago, I went back and looked at we fill out a form when we meet our neighbor. I looked at all the forms. We had done 27 different things. And probably the most, you might laugh at this one, but probably the most unusual one, we had a call from a homeless man who needed a haircut. He wanted to go to his friend's funeral. I met him at the barbershop and paid for his haircut. That was one of the 27. So, you know, like Maggie said, we don't say no. We help if they have the need. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and also your service to our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next presentation is introduction of the utility rate study and schedule and the 2025 to 2030 utilities capital improvement plan. Dylan Gamble, CIP manager, will you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This is a follow-up to the previous introduction to the utility rate study. I will be introducing our consultant FCS group in a second. I just wanted to discuss kind of the steps that we're taking and where we're at right now. So the last council meeting, you would have had the full picture of what the entire rate study is trying to achieve. Looking at, going through a very broad sense of what the assumptions are to get there and what it will take to kind of create a rate study that pairs the needs of both capital plan, operating costs, and match that to the revenues. And so with this meeting, we are following up that general overview, or we're looking at that first stage, which is revenue. And Sergey is going to get into this, and I'll just leave it right there and introduce Sergey again. I'm sure you're all familiar, and yeah, I'll just leave it to you, Sergey.
Thank you, Dylan, and good evening, Council. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
I'm now sharing my screen. It should be a full presentation of the revenue requirement discussion for today. And again, thank you for joining me today. Our focus will be on continuing our discussion of the overall rate study that is being performed for the city's water, sewer, and stormwater utilities. Now, as a quick outline, we're going to start talk about the progress that we made, a quick overview of the process itself. Again, I always like to touch upon the rate setting process every time we meet, just to reinforce the kind of the educational component of the study. And then we'll dive into the focus area, the revenue requirement. We'll go over some of the high level key assumptions that went into the development and talk about some of the results as well as alternatives for your consideration. Feel free to ask questions as we go throughout the presentation. Now, as a quick reminder, we started this study earlier in the year, but prior to the commencement of the study, we did a quick check-in in last November because we did know that some of the major assumptions that were incorporated into the 2020 study did not materialize, especially related to cost inflation. It has been a record high the last couple of years, as well as the growth has not been what we anticipated it to be. So prior to this more comprehensive study, we did a slight modification to the prior rate forecast for the 2024 implementation year, which was meant to help us dampen the blow, so to speak, when we did dive into the more comprehensive study. Since then, we have been working on updating the analysis for all utilities, and we had our first touch point with you, the council, talking just big picture rate setting fundamentals on June 24th. We followed that up pretty quickly with the first initial presentation of findings to the Parks and Public Works Committee, Council Committee, focusing on pretty much similar discussion that we're going to have today as the full council. So again, our focus today will be on that first step of the overall rate setting process that is summarized here on slide 4. Just a quick refresher again, a comprehensive study is a 3-step process that has to be performed sequentially. We start out by identifying the overall needs of each utility. At this point, we're not really focusing on the class of service. Here, we're focusing on the big picture. Are we meeting our needs? And if not, what do we need to do to meet those needs and making sure that each utility can be self-sufficient? Water's paying for water. We're not subsidizing water for sewer. Even though we might be a similar utility, from a rate setting perspective, we want to make sure at least to evaluate it from an independent standalone basis. Next, we dive into cost of service, which basically looks at answering the question if cost differences exist to provide service to different customer classes. So this time around, we have been doing this analysis in prior studies. We're going to see what progress we have made with some of the minor adjustments and phase-ins that we have done in the past, and seeing what else we need to do to get our classes to that target of cost of service. Finally, step number 3, once we have gone through the first 2 steps and identified our revenue targets, we finalize things with the development of the actual fixed and variable charges. So focusing on step 1, the first step of that revenue requirement is really to identify the financial policies that will inform our rate setting process overall. They really help us make sure that we can set rates appropriately into the future. That will help us make sure our utilities are sustainable. As we talked about during the fundamentals discussion, we're bringing back 3 reserve targets and coverage targets, so 3 policy targets overall. The first 2 focusing on reserves. Now, during the fundamentals discussion, we went over the intent of the policies themselves. Today, I just wanted to provide you with some a little bit more context in terms of what does it actually mean from a numerical perspective to each utility. So the first policy we're going to be looking at is in the operating reserve target, which is meant to be a cushion for liquidity. You're going to have cyclical fluctuations month to month, year to year of how we're generating revenues versus how we're spending those revenues to pay for our expenses. We want to make sure we have enough money in those down months when we're spending more than we have when we're generating in revenue to be able to get us through until we are able to recover. In terms of setting the policy target, a good target to have in the industry for operating reserves on their own is about 90 days, which we have been utilizing for all 3 utilities. Now, what does that mean? 90 days is about $1 million to have on hand for the water utility, about 1.1 to 1.4 million for the sewer utility, and about $500,000 or so for the stormwater utility. Now, you'll notice these numbers increase over time. So they start out lower and then increase. The reason for that is the target does follow the projected expenses and usually are tied to operating maintenance expenses. So as inflation makes the expenses more costly, our reserves need to follow suit and track and adjust accordingly. The second target we're going to be including is the capital contingency reserve, which is meant for any cost overruns, unanticipated projects, or breaks, any kind of asset failures, not catastrophic failures. A good range to have here is 1 to 2% of plant service. We have been historically targeting about 1% of assets. For the water utility, the range is about 500,000 to 800,000 in our forecast period, 900 to 1.1 for sewer, and 300 to 500 for storm. Similarly to the operating reserve, these targets do increase with time. The reason for that is our assets get more expensive as we build out and repair infrastructure, and then we add more capacity related projects. So the bigger our infrastructure becomes, the slightly higher our reserves need to be. Finally, the last policy incorporated in the study is associated with debt service coverage, which is, again, the intent here is to make sure that the creditor, it's basically a requirement with specific loans, and it's intended to satisfy the bond holders and the loan holders that we can repay our payment. Our net revenues here, revenues minus expenses, need to generate a cushion high enough to not only cover the payment of the loan, but also an excess cash amount just for assurance purposes. Now, minimum requirement is 1.25. Ideally, we want to target something a little bit higher for planning to go out to the market into the future to get a better rating and potentially save money through a better lower interest rate. Now, jumping straight into the key assumptions that went into this year's update, we are forecasting the new period of 2024 through 2030. For rate setting purposes, we'll be focusing on 2025 through 28. Now, we always like to look out beyond our rate setting period just to make sure there's no additional surprises that we might be seeing. If we know we have large capital needs outside of this 4-year initial period of 25 through 28, at least we want to take a look and see how it can impact our strategy and how it may inform our rate setting decision process. To forecast revenues into the future, we have analyzed historical statistics. We did look at historical 3-year consumption patterns for the water utility and actual billings for the sewer and stormwater utility. We did notice there are some fluctuations from a weather pattern perspective for the water utility. So to normalize and average out that weather pattern, we are using a 3-year average for water projections. For sewer and stormwater, we're utilizing the actual 23 numbers because majority of the revenues are fixed and should not be impacted by the consumption amount, especially from residential customers. Now, the big item here for forecasting revenues is our assumed growth rates. Currently, we're assuming no new growth rate occurring for any utilities for calendar year 24 and calendar year 25. We did receive some connection charge payments from the Snoqualmie Casino towards the sewer capital improvement projects, the treatment plant. But besides that, we're not anticipating or projecting any growth. Starting in 26, we're anticipating a 0.5% growth rate for all utilities, then increasing up to about 1% for the remainder of the forecast. Now, because growth rates impact your revenues, they impact them from both ongoing rates from monthly charges, but also from one-time fees imposed on new development or certain upsizing redevelopment, which is GFCs. So because we're not anticipating any new growth in the 24-25 period, there's not going to be any GFCs in that time period. They will only be projected to start in 2026 and beyond. For expense purposes, we are utilizing the 2024 budget, but we are looking at historical actual patterns of our expenditures. We did review each line item in detail with your staff when we forecast our costs throughout the forecast period, just to make sure we're not using any one-off figures. If it was a high or low year, we wanted to have as much of a realistic average kind of a forecast of costs as possible. After that, we're forecasting the costs with an average inflation rate of about 3 to 5%, depending if it's labor, benefits, or general cost inflation driven. Here we are utilizing historical average numbers. We're hoping basically that we have gone through the high inflationary years that we saw a couple years ago of 10%. So we're not anticipating any more 10% years to come that now that we're seeing inflation hopefully has stabilized. Lastly, in addition to the budget, we are anticipating there will be some additional needs from a staffing level perspective, because we are looking beyond just the budget period, and we're building some larger capital improvement projects such as a wastewater treatment plant. We're anticipating that we're going to have a need for some additional staff. Now, the forecast includes preliminarily 25 additions or 2025 additions for an administrator position, which is split between all three utilities, 2 sewer operators, a sewer lab analyst, and a water distribution technician.
Hey, sorry, can I jump in real fast? Just would like to call out that we would like to revise the scheduling of some of these positions. And so with regards to this, we're going to be making some recommendations on the staffing level to change the timing of these positions to better reflect the kind of the needs of the capital plan, as well as being respectful of the financial picture that we're presenting in this meeting. So that will change a little bit, and you'll see that the next go round. Thank you, Sergey.
Yep. Now, the last key assumption before diving into the discussion of results is the capital improvement program. Currently, the 2025 to 2030 capital improvement program is anticipated to be about $74.5 million for all three utilities, escalated to the year of construction. So again, in dollars based on the year of construction. So the bigger projects are included are the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, which are for the sewer utility, reservoir additions for the water utility, and the Snoqualmie restoration for the stormwater utility. We are anticipating we're going to receive some contributions in aid of construction, such as developer donations for some of our water projects. And in total, we're anticipating close to $8 million contributions, which help offset some of our project costs. Now, looking at the chart at the bottom right of the slide, you'll notice the visual representation of the capital improvement program. You can see that our first year is a little bit on the higher end compared to other years, but fairly in line of the average number. If you look at the colors, the blue represents the water utility projects, the yellow represents in the middle the sewer utility projects, and at the top, the dark green showing the storm. The front-loaded projects are associated with that wastewater treatment plant upgrades that has been underway and is primarily sewer driven. Once we get through that project, the sewer project averages drop off slightly, and over time, our emphasis gets to the water utility. So the water utility needs are a little bit lower because we're recognizing we're spending quite a bit of money on the sewer. Once we get through the sewer, we reallocate our time towards the water utility. Now, since the capital improvement program is such a big component of our overall needs, one of the biggest drivers is how do we finance those needs? So for our scenario impacts, we focused our alternatives around the financing options for the capital program. So scenario 1 that you'll be seeing in a second will focus on 100% cash financing. What happens if we try to finance all our projects through purely cash and reserves and ongoing rates? Option number 2 looks at maximizing debt service as much as possible to help us push out and relieve the pressure on our debt service. Finally, on our rates. Finally, the last option looks at a hybrid, trying to bring down some of the debt issuance, but utilize a little bit of a bigger mix of cash financing and debt financing. So on this slide, you'll find the summaries for each utility, and I'll go over what the information that you're looking at represents. I know there's quite a bit of numbers. We try to have the best side-by-side comparison, which made the slide a little bit busy. What you're looking at here are 3 tables, which have similar information. The tables are summarized by scenario. Table number 1 shows the 100% cash scenario. The middle table is the maximum debt, which represents about 52% of the total capital improvement program in that time period. And finally, the hybrid scenario, which represents about 28% of the total capital improvement program financed through debt. The tables will show you the impacts to a typical residential monthly bill. The monthly bill is made up of all 3 utilities. So the existing column and the following columns represent what a typical bill for a customer using 700 cubic feet or 7 CCF on a monthly basis. Now, the information may be different depending on the usage level and the customer type, but we wanted to focus our attention on the typical average impact. Next, we're comparing what the bill would be based on the needed proposal rate action on each scenario. We're showing the projected monthly bill in the following years, the dollar monthly difference, and the overall annual increase that this type of customer would experience. The last piece of information at the bottom of each chart shows the new debt proceeds that would be necessary to fund the program. So starting at the top with a cash scenario, if we don't have access to any new debt service, because we do have a pretty large cash need on the front end, we would need a pretty substantial rate adjustment in 2025. The average bill currently for all three utilities is about $177.46. That would need to go up to about $322 right away in 2025, or an 81% rate increase. There would be additional adjustments that would be necessary in the range of 4 to 4.5%, 4 to 5% for the next 3 years, dropping down to 3 to 3.5% thereafter. If we utilize debt to help us mitigate some of that front end pressure, issuing about $11 million in the first year of 2025, we would be able to bring that 80% increase down to about 10% altogether, with the majority of the rate pressure coming from that sewer utility. So again, we are looking at a combined bill, but a lot of the pressure is coming from that sewer utility and that sewer project on the front end. That would represent an increase of about $18 in the front end. After that, the second year would be a little under 5%, and follow the future years at 3% thereafter. We would need 3 separate potential issuances over that 6-year horizon, totaling about $38 million of revenue bond proceeds. Right now, we are being conservative, assuming that we will not have any access to loans. Again, they're not always guaranteed. So for this discussion, we are focusing on revenue bonds. The last option tries to minimize the amount of debt we're borrowing, yet still utilizing it to help us through some of the higher years and higher capital project years through the treatment plant projects and some of the water storage projects. Here, we would borrow about $21 million instead of the 38, but we would rely a little bit more on rates, with closer to 15% per year for 3-year increases, followed more with inflationary increases in the tail end of the projection period. So this kind of gives you that range of 100% cash financing to maximum debt utilization financing, and somewhere in the middle with that hybrid option. Now, really, this is the presentation content that we have, the 3 alternatives. I wanted to pause here and see if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to discuss, because we're pretty much at the presentation's end.
Councilor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hi, how are you doing? Mr.
Sergey.
His last name, how do you pronounce it?
Tarasov. Oh, I'll let you
Tarasov.
pronounce it.
I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name?
That works. Tarasov, Tarasov, it sounds great.
I didn't want to make a mistake. Thank you so much, sir.
Mhm.
So I'm just looking at the second column, the second scenario. So total debt there, call it 38.4 million. So am I correct? Does that assume that we would be debt financing 52% of the CIP for the utility? Is that correct?
That's correct. So out of the $74.5 million, we would be financing or forecasting to finance about 38.4 million.
Okay. And for the hybrid, the 21 million, that would get us to financing only 28% of it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Through debt. The rest would have to come through cash generation.
And you're saying primarily, I heard your last comment that not necessarily through loans, because they're not guaranteed, but more through bonds. Is that correct?
Right. The forecast that we utilized this time around is that we would be utilizing bonds for all financing.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Watton.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Tarasov. Quite frankly, I don't like any of these, but we've got to choose one, or we've got to choose a path forward. I guess this question goes over to both our finance team as well as our legal team. If we're looking at maximum debt of 38 million, I seem to recall from 2 weeks ago, we talked about our ability to bond, and our maximum is somewhere around 80 million total. Mr. Boutte, I bet you have
Hello there.
some insight.
Well,
Thank you.
I do, because that conversation was around general obligation debt. This is not general obligation debt. This is basically debt associated with a business type, in this case, utilities for the most part. So there is no legal limit when it comes to the state on how much debt you can take out when it comes to your utilities. Because ideally, you've got the fees in place, right, that you can increase to whatever extent you want in order to fund that debt service. So there isn't any sort of limitation when it comes to revenue bonds, which is really primarily the the debt financing instrument for our green bucket enterprise funds, in this case, utilities.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. I guess the next question is if we fully bond this, what might it prevent us from doing in the future? What are the risks?
Well, so I think from our conversation in the last meeting, for the most part, while this may reduce the short-term pressure overall on our ratepayers, over the long term, there is certainly an opportunity cost associated with interest. So you will see probably higher interest rates in the future as a result of potentially taking out this debt service. But you know, as we've described before, in terms of the benefits when it comes to debt financing overall, intergenerational equity, making sure that the users tomorrow pay for a portion of this project, and some of these projects are certainly going to be lasting, you know, 50 to 75 years for the most part. Making sure that they're paying for a portion of that project is, I think, overall critically important. Then also, if we're trying to finance everything through cash, a common experience is negative carry, which your interests are never going to be able to generate necessarily the revenue that you need in order to keep up with your the inflation expenses associated with construction. So I can certainly see some benefits. The negatives, in my impression, are likely going to be opportunity costs well into the future. Plus, you're dealing with a higher interest rate environment probably at this stage right now. So there was a way to time this a little bit differently. You may want to hold off on sort of bonds until maybe 27, 29 in order to try to see those interest rates drop. But that would mean probably more upfront pressure with the rates. So.
Counselor Washington?
Yes, just a follow-up question, Director. What is our current level of debt for utilities?
So for utilities, I don't quite have the principal amount off of the top of my head, but I'll just mention that we issued a $32.5 million bond, revenue bond back in 2018. So certainly we are paying close to $1.8 million annually of debt service on that. In addition, there's another revenue bond, which I think is coming due in 2030, if I'm not mistaken or close. There's an LTGO bond, which is paid for partially by utility rates. And then there's a couple of small public works trust fund loans, as well as a drinking water revolving state loan as well that we're paying for. So there's a couple of issuances still outstanding. One of them I think is going to be dropping, or a couple of them are going to be dropping off towards the end of this decade.
Thank you.
Counselor Johnson?
Maybe you said and I missed it. But for the hybrid, the 28%, was that just kind of like an example? It could be like something like this. Or it could really be 32, it could be 14%, whatever. Or was there a specific reason that it's 28 here and that if we did the hybrid, it's 28%?
So for the scenarios, kind of the first two give you the bookends, so to speak, because you'll notice 52% is not 100% debt finance, because if we take out too much debt, we're not going to need it and we're going to have too high of reserves. So the 58 based on the capital program and timing, or 52, sorry, is kind of the limit that we would need, trying to push the rates down as much as possible. If we borrow more, we would actually run into coverage issues, and it creates a lot of reiterative circular issues. So the 28% is just more looking at the projects that we have and trying to come somewhere in the middle. You could do a little bit more, you could do a little bit less. There is, you know, it's that range between the bookends that you want to that you can target.
Sergey, if I could follow up, that is a lot of the question we're kind of here for, is we're kind of showing some of the options, the boundaries, so to speak, not literally in all cases. And as you've heard, there's a lot of specificity to go into these assumptions here, but that's kind of the question that we have for you is, which direction are you okay with? Is there a preference you want us to proceed down, and would you like us to make a refined version of that? So that's in many ways what we're trying to showcase here.
Counselor Christensen?
And this may not be a great question, but as I'm looking at the chart, I'm seeing the new debt proceeds, but I don't see anywhere what the cost that would be associated with going forward with either 52% or the 28% option. What it would cost us basically for that debt service. Do we have that information?
Sergey, I don't know if you'd want to pull this up, and I'm going to guess you don't, but
And what do you mean by the cost component, just to make sure I provide you with the.
Yeah, what it's gonna
What is
cost.
the annual,
Have
so the annual debt service or the actual issuance, because the revenue bonds do have an assumed issuance cost. So from an issuance cost perspective, we're anticipating about a 1% issuance cost, which we're building into the cost of the loan. So the borrowing would include the issuance cost itself. Let's take a look. I have it broken down by each utility, and I can pull the information together. Now, in terms of the payment itself, I can provide you with that answer. I just need a little bit of time to aggregate it between utilities. If that's something that you're looking for.
Councilor Washington.
I have a question, sir. Is there any way to kind of look at it more with a hybrid model? The director mentioned that, we are in a higher than normal, we'll make that term relative for the last 10 to 15 years, higher than normal rate environment. Is there any way to maybe front load with cash and then maybe on the back end, ideally do some of it with bonds?
And so that comes with that discussion of 25. You'll notice if we tried to solve, if you'll notice the timing of the debt issuance, we're basically trying to cover a 2-year period with the issuance. The reason for that is because we want to avoid going to the bond market every year, because you're going to have costs of getting rated. If you haven't been rated in a while, going out to get issuance and all the legal paperwork and everything else that has to be done. So we anticipate every other year reality. That could be every 3 years potentially, but we're also trying to take into account how much cash you borrow, because if you borrow too much upfront, your annual payment is going to be pretty high, and your rates, the whole purpose for mitigating some of these increases is to smooth out the rate strategy as much as possible. So if we're looking at a 2-year issuance, we're basically having to cover 25 and 26 with cash proceeds if we want to delay any new borrowing until 27. So that would put us in the range of basically cash funding scenario where we would need an 80% rate increase. If that is not palatable, then we need to talk about, well, how much debt are we comfortable? Now we're utilizing a 5% interest rate forecast for our revenue bond assumption. I believe the figures recently have been around there, a little lower. Historically, we've the last 5 years, a lot of utilities have benefited from the lower interest rates. I think some utilities have had 3.5% bond rates, in the 3s, depending on the timing, some in the 4s, depending on the utility and their rating. So we're being a little conservative and using 5%, but it's hard for me to estimate what it would be in a couple of years.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Councilor Watton has his hand up.
Mind if I just?
Just 1 second, Councilor Watton. We have Drew Routier, our finance director, real quick.
So in addition to that, with what Sergey just mentioned, really your opportunity for potentially shifting it around comes through the CIP itself. So it'd be the timing of the projects and how those might shift that could alter some of the discussion around what percentage or the hybrid model that you may want. However, I think if we're going to pull our public works department up here, for example, that they provide very good reasons about why they've structured it the way they have. And if you were even to go back to the slide in which Sergey presented about the capital improvement plan, they've tried to smooth that out as much as possible as well too. So.
Thank you. Councilor Watton.
Thank you, Mayor. As being the banker in the room, is there a chart that we would have or that we could see of sources of cash, being cash and bond, and the uses? How much are we putting out? I think that would be more helpful for me, unless it already exists. And if you can point to that, that would be very useful for me as well.
I believe we can prepare kind of our forecast based on, are you looking for that for each scenario?
Exactly. Because this doesn't tell me the whole story of how much we're actually utilizing in cash, burning in cash, or that we're borrowing. We can see what we're borrowing in cash, but not. I assume that, for instance, in the third scenario, then we're actually using $2 million in cash that year. And I guess the next biennium, we're using 9 million in cash. But to council member Christensen's point too is, the cost of borrowing has, drives the rate as well. So I think there's some pieces that I need to be a little more, I need to have a better understanding of than just what is on this page to make me feel comfortable.
Okay. Yeah, that's quite a bit of information to aggregate, so we can definitely put together a more comprehensive summary of our projections for each scenario, for each utility in terms of what are the expenses and revenues and capital programs. It'll just take a little bit of time to put that summary together.
And
Thank you.
maybe a little additive here. If I'm reading the request correctly, would you like to see the forecasted revenues at our current rates? Because that does change the picture. If we change rates as this is proposing, that will change the forecasted revenue. Are you asking for it for all three of these versions or just the current one?
No, just so that we have a better understanding of the cash we're using versus the cash we're borrowing and the total project costs. And because to me, it looks like we're using cash at different rates in each of the bienniums. And maybe I'm not understanding. Maybe it's the projects can be put off to the next biennium. I don't know what I'm looking at in saying, okay, I'm going to approve scenario X. And that's the thing that I'm kind of struggling with. And again, I don't like any of these. I mean, I think our water rates are pretty decently high, but when we look at other communities, they're even higher. So I just need to understand it a little bit better.
Council, this sounds like this could be a big project for Sergey. And so we need to know if that's the information that you want, or is there some scenario that we can dive into that you would want to see? So Mayor Pro Tem Holloway had her hand up, and then Councilor Cotton.
Well, one, there's other data in here that our rates are about average with surrounding communities. So I'll bring that information next time and show you that. So I want to be careful of that. We're not extraordinarily above the rising communities. The city has managed its utilities quite well over the years, and that represents us in our positioning in relationship to other communities. But what this really boils down to, again, is a philosophical conversation of, do you make those who used the facility pay for it? Or do you make those who will use the new facility pay for it? Or do you split the difference? Okay. And really the 100% cash means you're going to do nothing until you've saved enough money up in rates to pay for it. Given the timing of these things, that will result in higher rates just to get the money in hand. Skip, move out. Some of these can't wait. They have lifespans of 75 years, but it takes time it's a shorter time frame to get the money in hand to actually do it. Okay. So I really think, at least past practice that I've been in, I've split the difference at about that 50% rate of those who use the past facility pay for its replacement, and those who will use the new facility pay for it in the future. And that results in some debt to do that time transition of money.
Councilor Cotton. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I certainly agree that, raising rates is not palatable on any. So for any of these scenarios, but definitely to raise rates almost 82% in a year is, something that it's just not palatable. I would certainly lean towards the hybrid scenario, as far as if we're gonna kind of zone in on, you know, doing a combination where it's kind of in the middle as far as the rate increases, but is not over the top, like the 100% cash.
Like the middle one is what you're thinking,
Uh,
50-50.
the hybrid,
Hybrid.
the scenario 3. Where we're doing a combination of both.
Right.
What you're really saying is you don't like option one.
I do not for myself, I do not like option 1.
I feel like if that's the general consensus, we can start to work that way and provide the next version of it with something in that direction. And there's always opportunity to kind of ask us to reassess those valuations as we go forward. You really see that in the next step when we start to look at who pays what. So whether it's multifamily paying more or less, these values will change a bit. And that might be a better moment to kind of reflect on those consequences of the different evaluations, but we can absolutely pick one, work its way through a little bit, and then just ask the question once we've walked our way down the road a bit. Again, is this still okay, right? We've walked further and further and made more assumptions, but we're stepping towards an option.
So are you hearing hybrid is preference at this point? Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I think we get a lot of public comment if we went with option number 1. Now, for the money that we'd have to spend in the very near term, the next couple of years, say, you could think of at least a couple of large projects that be coming up in the very near future that would add up to a lot of millions. To just in terms of just figuring out how much of that percentage that should be, is it 28 the right amount? Should be 35, should be 20, whatever it is. I just like to get a little bit of a better sense, just like a finger in the air from a wet finger in the air from the administration of how much are we talking for some of these projects.
Specifically, are you asking about how much debt or bond is required per project, or which projects are big and what years?
Yeah, more like that.
Then I have the slides for you, and I think it's item number 9 or 8 this evening is actually a review of the utility CIP, and it puts all the projects in what years.
Excellent, thank you.
Have that ready to go, and we can dive into it then. The last one that's kind of peripheral to your other question was that we probably are going to start looking at doing a utility rate study such as this one every 4 years. And that means that we would probably be having a conversation about rate studies before we'd be diving into the later debt. That could maybe help you kind of see kind of where our focus is on in this process. But
Councilor Johnson?
One other thing, and maybe this is coming up, I'm not sure, but in terms of the rates being broken down into different categories and such, I believe that historically the council's been trying to move toward a more equitable system over time, and so I hope that we continue down that path.
And yeah, we will showcase kind of what that historical trend has been and where it's likely to go. And Sergey was part of that conversation in the past, so we will be bringing that as the step 2. So once we kind of work through this.
So Councilor Watton had requested, further information regarding sources and uses, forecast revenues, et cetera. So is this something that we will be providing as just part of this whole thing once we kind of settle in on it, or what's?
So in essence, what I'm hearing as the request is everyone here has 3 options in front of them for the most part. We would be potentially producing something similar when it comes to is your 11/17 statement of sources, uses, and fund balances overall. I don't know what kind of value that it will necessarily provide to council, although we can certainly go in that effort and maybe move down one of the tracks here as suggested overall, with a focus between scenario 2 and maybe scenario 3 in different regards. But really, what is the financial impact that we're often focused on when it comes to utilities? It's the rate impact overall. And so that is what we're demonstrating you today is probably your number one sense of what is very important is what do those rates look like overall? And that was our intention with this presentation. So we're more than happy to kind of provide that material. It will take time and effort to do that overall. But we think it's probably wise to actually take a course of action or at least move in one of the directions here, see what it looks like, and then maybe come back. You're not happy with it that time, and then maybe go down a different track if we have to.
Does that sound reasonable? Regarding
Yes.
that request? Okay, and wait on any further detail regarding sources, uses, and that information, right?
Sounds reasonable.
And as mentioned, right, we will be getting into the COSA, the cost of service analysis, which will take what we see here. This is really a cloudy crystal ball that we're providing to you right now and make it a lot more concrete or clear when it comes to what is the impact on our residents, what is the impact on the multifamily customer classification, and so on. We just need kind of a starting point here. And I think what I'm hearing is generally around scenario 2 and scenario 3 is the direction that we should start approaching this. So, you know, and to try to minimize the rate impacts, but also understand that there's an opportunity cost that comes down the road.
Okay, do we have any other comments regarding this item? I think, again, we will be looking at the CIP a little bit later tonight. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sergey.
Great, not a problem, and thank you for the input. We'll be working towards cost of service next. And the next time we meet, diving a little bit deeper into class-specific impacts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So this time, next item is to provide residents time to comment on items that are not on the agenda. And no online public comments will be accepted during the meeting. Written comments are encouraged and may be submitted in person, mail, or emailed. Before I read through the ground rules, is there anyone in the council chambers that wish to make public comment? Okay, I am seeing none, so our public comment at this point is closed. Next, we move on to consent agenda, which contains approval of the city council meeting minutes dated June 24th, 2024, approval of the claims report dated July 8th, 2024. Councilors, a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
That's so moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilor Washington, second by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway. And any public comment regarding this item? Seeing none, councilors, is there any discussion regarding these two items? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and it passes and the consent agenda is approved. Next item is an ordinance AB 24-078, State Route 202 Elkfield speed limit reductions. So this is the first reading of ordinance 1291. Lead Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, would you please read the introduction and motion options?
This agenda bill seeks to amend Snoqualmie Municipal Code to reduce the speed limit on SR 202, a Washington Department of Transportation owned road from milepost 27.95 middle school to milepost 28.28 southerly city limits to 40 miles per hour versus 50 miles per hour, which it is today. And despite the way it is, I'm going to do this as an and instead of an or. Can I do that? Motion to authorize first reading pertaining to the adoption of ordinance 1291, amending the Snoqualmie Municipal Code to reduce the speed limit of SR 202 from milepost 2795 to milepost 28.28, the southerly limits from 50 miles per hour to 40 miles per hour, and set forth the second reading and adoption at July 22nd, 2024 City Council meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
Just to put that in place, I'd like to make a secondary motion and have discussion of motion to waive the council rule on procedure 96.2.2 and adopt the ordinance amending the Snoqualmie Municipal Code to reduce the speed limit on first and final reading. May I have a second on that motion?
Seeing none, the motion died.
Motion fit. What?
I'll second it,
I was just gonna.
but just procedurally. So we have two motions pending?
We have a motion and then a motion to amend.
Right, so the first motion is moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Washington. Second motion is moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and second by Councilor Christensen.
Second.
Oh,
If,
Cotton.
Councilmember Christensen doesn't, I will second it.
That's fine if it's procedurally okay to go forward that way.
I think you would need somebody else to forward a motion to amend the first motion. If you've got a motion on the floor, somebody else would need to move to amend it.
I can't amend my own motion.
You can, but that would supersede your first motion.
I partially disagree, but can we just have the conversation, guys? Again, we don't set the speed limit. WashDOT does. I've just sent you an email. We at least have about 3 elk accidents a year. North Bend has significantly more and they're doing the same consideration. It may just be the length of the road each of us has and what the elk decide to do. So there have been incidents of elk car accidents. 50 miles per hour is going pretty fast, 40 still pretty fast, but there's a compromise here. And really, again, we don't set the speed limit. This is merely us recommending to WashDOT that they do the analysis and consider a lower speed limit. Having that, I think having the 2 readings under that condition is a bit excessive of our time. But I will advise, I did discuss with the chair of Public Works, who's absent tonight, but his opinion was we ought to do the 2 readings to give the community every opportunity they can have to come forward and discuss this with us. I just think they have our opportunity to reel with a decision body that really makes this decision, WashDOT, and we can provide them, if members of the community come forward that want to have input, we can provide them contacts and WashDOTs to have that input, the true decision body in regards to this.
So we do have Councilor Watton, who is the Chair of Public Safety, raising his hand. Councilor Watton, you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first of all, I want to thank Meadowbrook Farm Preservation Association because they're the ones that have requested this. And I believe that's the reason why it's before us. And I do think it's a very important issue and one that we need to give due consideration to. But at the same time, I would not want to waive the first and second reading on this. I think it's important that we follow the procedure. Yes, it is important. Yes, we do need to have this reviewed, but I don't think the urgency is as great as requiring us to waive the first reading. So that would be my recommendation.
Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I just would like to know from the folks who have the most experience in the field, which in the room would be the city staff, what their recommendation is. Does our staff who work in this kind of engineering think that this is an urgent matter to forward, or do they think that it's more appropriate to give the public ample opportunity to comment, etc.? Basically, I want to know what staff's opinion is.
And that's why we have Patrick Fry up here.
Patrick Fry, project engineer. A couple things. I just want to make a point of clarification. We've requested to WashDOT to assess the situation. Is the way that this happens. So we go to them and we say, hey, we think the speed limit might be too high. Can you do a study? And they did that study and they've come back and made the recommendation to lower to 40 miles per hour. This isn't us going to them saying we think it should be 40 miles an hour. It's them saying we think it should be 40 miles an hour and we want your concurrence on that. And so that's where we are tonight. Is WashDOT has made the recommendation to lower to 40 miles an hour. And if we accept it, then they will move forward through their passages to get it lower. North Bend is also in the same boat. I should make it clear. He brought it to his, or Senator Mark Rigos, director over there, relayed to me that he's brought it to his committee and is bringing it to his council as well. To answer your question, Councilmember Johnson, we're not the bottleneck in this process. I should make clear WashDOT is the bottleneck in this process. So if council think it's worthwhile to have 2 readings of this to give all the time in the world to, well, the 2 weeks in the world, to members of the public to make comment, that seems fine with me in that regard. It's more just a matter of your guys' time.
Councilor Washington.
Thank you, sir. So just kind of, thinking this through, if we were to waive the second reading and to expedite it, what kind of time frame are we looking at for it to actually be changed?
It's in WashDOT's hands, so I really can't make a judgment on that.
So it could take a very long time.
Could be 2 months. So you might have, this was before your time on council, but we went through this process about 2 years ago, through all of Snoqualmie up until the limits where it was, and it probably took about a month for them to do that. That doesn't mean it's going to be a month this time around. It could be 1 month, it could be 1 week, could be 2 months. I really can't say.
Any other comment? Oh, let's see. First of all, Councilor Christensen, you had your hand up earlier, and then Councilor
Yeah.
Cotton.
I'm usually not one to jump on authorizing something to go forward through based on the first reading alone. I think in this case, it may be warranted just because this is a situation where we do have elk, we do have a history of accidents, and the middle school will be back in session before you know it. And sometimes it takes people a little bit longer to slow down there than they really should, especially with some tweens running about. In this case, I would feel comfortable moving forward tonight just to make sure we're not causing any kind of a delay. I did also at FNA request some notations in here just that we might go forward without doing the second reading, and I appreciate that that was included. So based on that, I'm comfortable moving forward at this point.
I think Councilor Cotton, you had your hand up, and then Councilor
Yeah,
Johnson.
I certainly think we should waive the second reading. I can't imagine that anybody in the public would really, that there'd be a strong force of not wanting to lower the speed limit because of the safety issues. And all the other council members have made very valid points, but I think this is, since WashDOT has already, basically said, they've done the study, they've agreed to this, that let's just give our stamp of approval and move it forward.
Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, seeing as how the only professional opinion in front of me that has an opinion on what to do is to lower the speed limit from 50 to 40. And there are no other professionals telling me that that's not what we should do. I think that we should go ahead and try not to slow it down. Actually, we should slow it down, but not slow down the process.
So you want
Yes,
second
I'm
reading?
fine with waiving the first reading then.
Based on that,
Mayor
if,
Pro Tem Holloway.
based on that, if second will agree, I'd like to revise my motion to be that second one, which one is it? Motion to waive council rule procedure 9622 and adopt ordinance 1291, amending the Snoqualmie Municipal Code to reduce the speed limit on SR 202 from milepost. You can read it, 2 mileposts, you can read it. Southerly there from 50 miles an hour to 40 miles per hour on the first and final reading. May I have a second on that motion.
Second.
So it's moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and second by Councilor Cotton. To approve it and to waive the second readings. This be the first and final. So any further discussion on this? So this is back to, we now have 3 motions on the floor.
I was gonna say, yeah.
No, he advised that the second motion was invalid with concurrence of
You
second.
disagreed, and so when you said it,
I'm
so,
agreeing.
okay,
I withdrew motion with concurrence of second, resubmitted with the motion as written up there. with some adverb to cut it short.
Okay. So we're choosing the second option. So any further discussion regarding this one?
Yeah, I'm choosing.
Choosing first option to waive second reading and do it on first and final.
Right.
That
That's the first
one.
That one.
That one, yeah.
motion to waive,
Yes.
ending in, yeah, first and final reading. Right, that's where I was going.
Yeah.
The other one was removed.
The one after the or would have been would have been a reading and
Oh.
second.
For some reason, it's been flipped on mine, so that's why. I'm sorry. I
Sorry.
don't know why, but
Practical
Okay.
joke.
so anyway, so I think we're on the same page, so. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Counselor Watton? No. Any opposed, say nay. Is he still on board? Yes. Counselor Watton, did you vote?
Still on there?
Who's not voting?
Sorry. Aye,
So you are for
yes,
waiving and waiving this being the first and final reading.
yes.
Okay, so it's unanimous, so. Right. And the other one has been removed, the first couple motions, okay. Moving on. Thank you. Committee reports, is there a public safety committee report?
There is no report, Your Honor.
Thank you. Community development, is there a community development committee report?
No community development committee report at this time.
Thank you. And then Parks and Public Works, AB 24-075, the 2025 to 2030 non-utilities capital improvement plan. This is a continuation of our discussion at this, from this evening's roundtable meeting. So who wants to read the introduction and motion? Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
Well, yeah, I'm
As
just
part of Parks and Public Works?
confused. There's no link in the
Yeah,
agenda.
there's no link. You have to find it.
Hang on a second. I got to do some scrolling.
Yeah, there will be in the top of the agenda.
The introduction is not.
Oh, click on one.
Oh.
Yeah, click on one at the very.
Okay, that takes me down to it. The purpose of the agenda bill is for council consideration of mayor's 2025-2030 proposed capital improvement plan. The proposed CIP will be presented to city council for deliberation. The planning and financial management tool helps the city of Snoqualmie identify and prioritize capital investments over a 6-year period. The CIP is required by state of Washington Growth Management Act, GMA, RCW 36.70A, which is state law and requires local governments to plan and manage growth that would impact the environment and quality of life. I can't take the motion. Motion to approve resolution 1692 with option 1 as presented earlier for the 2025-2030 capital improvement plan, non-utility capital improvement plan.
Second.
Been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Christensen. To approve the non-utility capital improvement plan. So is there any public comment regarding that item? Anyone that's within the chambers? Seeing none? Yes. Yes, please, Josh Sutton, YMCA.
Got confused by the bold. My name is Josh Sutton. I'm the facilities executive for the YMCA of Greater Seattle. I'm joined today by Ann Bonnock, who is our Vice President of Financial Development, and by Sarah Bianchi-Afori, who is our Associate Vice President and District Executive for half dozen of our YMCA branches. I want to be clear that the Y is supportive of the envisioned pool expansion, and we believe that the time is now to approve it and move it forward. We've been a partner on the design of this project, and we've been doing our own work to make sure that we're keeping our business in order around this. The funding gap is not going to grow smaller because escalation in code compliance will outpace available funds. And you will not get much closer financially, as you saw today, than you are right now. And you already know this is a multi-decade conversation where thousands of local kids have grown up in the Snoqualmie with little to no access to water safety or swim lessons. The Y has experienced ourselves projected costs getting beyond funding capacity on a project. And it is a decade plus spiral that is disappointing to everyone. Community, our donors, our members, families, seniors, all wish something had happened and we missed the opportunity. We're still trying to pick up on that project, and I don't know when it's going to happen yet. You're much closer right now than we are. So Y reps have met with a number of city council members. We've addressed previous points and also discussed the Y's position on fundraising. We have a $2.5 million target, and we're already underway on that. We've already submitted a $1.2 million request for the state YRF fund that we've talked about. We have a $1.3 million target to raise in this community, which we can start fundraising depending on your vote today. It's a $1.3 million target, which is a stretch from the $1 million that multiple fundraising agencies that are smarter than me told us we could raise in this community, because we want to stretch and provide support for this project. In addition to that, we will fund between $350,000 and $500,000 of this project for furnishings, fixtures, and equipment that does not show up on the project costs. Now, I've also talked with a number of you about the Y's financial position and operating. We've been your partner in the Snoqualmie community since 2011, operating the facility. And in the past 5 years, we will have lost $1.3 million in the Snoqualmie community operating this facility. That's our commitment to this community that we have followed through on. That's been at no cost to the city's operating, that per our operating agreement. And we remain committed to serving this community, and we think the expansion would actually solidify our position. So that's why we ask that you move project forward today, because we think this is the time to do it. Now, should the council choose a different option, we ask that you adopt a resolution that ties a future vote specifically for the pool expansion to the King County $4 million grant. And the reason why we think that you should tie it to that is because that funding, along with a direct legislative ask in the next session, is the best path to close the $5 million gap. You've already identified this funding, you haven't secured it. And that was a conversation we've had a few times now. So you could do this today, or you can push it off until you get that $4 million. But the further you push it off, the more that delta starts to grow. If you approve a statement that ties it towards that type of funding in a short term, we believe that we can continue to fundraise in the community, and we believe that we can continue to go to the state and advocate for being included in this coming session, this coming biennium for that $1.2 million. Now, also a specific funding goal will target specific funding goal and target will focus this council, the staff, and the community around what it's going to take to fulfill this promise to community. The promise is that kids are going to be safe and learn to be safe around water and learn to swim. That seniors can stay active and engaged, and that Snoqualmie residents will have access to a pool in their own community. So that's what we ask of you today, and we appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Josh. Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
I would like to motion an addition to the CIP, a note particularly on the community center. And thank you for my fellow council for helping me wordsmith this. For the community center, the intent is that as soon as an acceptable set of options and funding is secured to move forward, we will move forward with this project.
Second it.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and second by Councilor Washington for additional motions to the current motion, which is intent as soon as acceptable set of options and funding.
No, to add a footnote to the CIP of
That's
those words.
footnote. Okay. So if you repeat it, so intent is as soon as the acceptable.
Intent is that as soon as an acceptable set of options and funding is secured to move forward with this project. I'm not necessarily, Josh, I'm not necessarily tying it to the $4 million, but if somebody wants to write me a check for $6 million to get done with this conversation, I'd take it. But I don't see it happening.
Okay. Council, we have any comments regarding this? Councilor Cotton?
I think Councilmember Christensen had her hand up before.
You can go first. Oh, I didn't see.
I just had a question for Councilmember Holloway as far as the options part of the motion. It was, are you referring to the conversation we had earlier at the
Yes,
round table?
option one we had during the roundtable.
Okay. So are you referring to we need to pick one? Or we have picked one?
I made a motion for option one. If you want to have a different, one of the other options, we should have that conversation.
Okay, so we don't have to like restate the whole thing again?
Yeah.
Okay,
Not unless there's want for something else.
okay.
We have Councilor Christensen and then Councilor Watton.
Actually, I think I have a point of order.
Okay, point of order. State
Was
your
that
point.
your motion? To select option one?
But so the motion was option one. There's a sub dinosaur of the footnote.
Okay, I guess I just missed that was the original motion, but if it was, then okay.
I'm sorry, I have to state, it has to be a definitive motion, so I motioned for option one.
I just missed it. All right, thank you.
Councilor Christensen?
So then in making your motion, are you electing to not go forward with the other resolution? Or are you intending that we speak about that later?
So which other resolution?
The resolution that was provided in terms of the fully written out, this is what council's position is.
Second paragraph. So what you're talking about.
It is the second attachment that was in there.
Just a second. Councilor Watton has his hand up. Councilor Watton?
Here's my concern. I think we've pegged this project for the expansion at about 28 million, which we have identified 23 million, and we have about a $5 million gap, if I'm correct. What is being suggested is that we move this out, and if we move it out farther, while we are trying to secure other funds, we're really looking at 2 to 3 years before we start and complete the construction. I mean, we're looking at 2.5 years of delay on $28 million. We're going to be double that. Instead of a $5 million gap, we're going to have a $10 million gap in my calculation, just because of the cost of inflation. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best move, and that's my concern.
Thank you, Councilor Watton. Councilor Washington?
Director, so my question would kind of be the converse. So what happens if we move this forward without the secured funding and we have to stop construction because we don't have the funding in place? The full funding in place. Thank you.
Can't do that.
Or City Administrator Chambliss?
Okay.
This is not a contract with the contractor to move forward. This is a CIP. We would have discussions on a separate item to bring forward for authorization to continue.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, and also I think that if we did approve a contract under the design build scenario, I don't think there is it gets half built. It's that we have the contract to finish it, and if we're a buck short, then we have to take out a bond. That's my understanding. I mean, we would have to
stop.
we would have to complete it, is my understanding of the design build.
Councilor Washington.
I guess I would ask what, because that's not my understanding. If we don't have the secured funding, will we stop the construction, or then that 5.2 million grows into potentially 10 million?
City Administrator.
I doubt the council would vote to begin the construction without the secured funding. Is my understanding of what I'm hearing.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
So, yeah, and keep in mind, the CIP says intent, it does not commit. At the time that the contract would come before us, that would be the time with which we commit. And yes, I believe under the tenets of the design build, once you commit, it's a firm fixed price is that guaranteed minimum price.
Maximum.
Guaranteed maximum price.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm cheating. Guaranteed maximum price, okay? So when that contract comes forward and we say, yes, we're committed.
Run the hook.
There's nothing to get out of it. And if you try, the legal fees will cover any savings you might get.
Councilor Johnson.
To Councilmember Christensen's question, the way that I was envisioning that this could work is that we would adopt the resolution 1692 with the amendment from Councilmember Holloway, which is just a footnote at the bottom of that page. And then separately, we would do a motion after having done that and voted on that to approve the resolution 1693, which would be talking about, okay, here's what we mean by we intend to complete the community center expansion, etc. That's how I was envisioning the flow.
Councilor Christensen.
And just to further that, it's my understanding that assuming that we go forward with resolution 1693 after we discuss 1692, that language would be helpful in order to get funding for our partners and for some of the requests that have already gone out. So we don't lose that. And so that we are clear with the community about what our hopes are. And that we have a document as well to take to potential partners and our legislators to hopefully show them how serious we are about moving forward, assuming that we can get the additional funding in place.
Finance Director Boutte, did you have some?
Oh, well, I think it's moving away, right, from the discussion. So ultimately, the bond is the backstop, right? That's what we've proposed, provided a worst case scenario, and to the point where we may need a $5.2 million line of credit that could roll into a bond. We demonstrated that the capital improvement plan, ideally using the buying and selling of homes through the real estate excise tax, would be sufficient to cover that, and that we would not be endangering any of our capital programs in order to accomplish that. But that's neither here nor there. That's now in the past at this point. I think what we could do if we wanted to with option number one, if we're going to delay it for 2 years, we could actually call out specifically if it's important.
That's the 1 year.
Oh, sorry, 1 year. Yeah, option number one. Right, is to call out potentially specifically the King County, right, grant of $4 million. We do not have to have a line in there that says grants or other funding sources. We could call out specifically King County as an intention that we are going to go get that $4 million from them. If we're going to go demonstrate that, right, overall, having Dylan back here that often has to go seek those grants, right? Being able to point to a piece of paper to tell them that indeed you guys are the last dollar in, right, in order to get it across the line is a possibility. It's a lot less, it's more concrete than just how obscure it is right now in terms of saying grant or other funding sources at this point. So we could potentially add that to the mix. We want a legislative grant associated with that. That would also be, we can include the $1.2 million back into the conversation if it's more of a possibility at this point, plus any sort of additional funding sources we have. If we know what we're targeting, we can reduce the vagueness of this and probably provide us with more help. So.
Councilor Johnson. Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, what it still has currently in the language in the one pager is line of credit. And that was the thing that I had a problem with 2 weeks ago. And I wonder if we made those two changes, adding King County aquatics grant and perhaps direct appropriation, for the rest of it, instead of saying line of credit in the CIP. I think that that would be more honest about what I understand to be the intent of the council. Leaving it as line of credit as it currently is, it feels like that's not the intent of the council and would feel a little bit dishonest. So is that something that we would need to make a motion for to change? Or is that understood in choosing option one? I guess it's a question to
So-
staff.
I would say we could probably break out that $5.8 million and provide more clarity. So, does it require a motion? I'm not quite positive. I'd probably have to look for the city attorney in order to modify an exhibit attached to the resolution itself, but yeah.
City Administrator Chambliss.
Let me try to navigate our way through the maze. So what it sounds like I'm hearing is there's interest on moving forward with the first resolution. And council would like us to return with a much more specific resolution targeting the King County grant and state funds rather than the vague 1693 as it stands now. Is that kind of what I'm hearing, or am I totally confused?
So I'm confused what you say is the first.
Your motion with the baby dinosaur.
Okay, so we're showing it as,
Approving the CIP.
24.
well, I don't want, guys, I want no fuzz on this. The original CIP that was presented, unacceptable. Okay, what is acceptable, what we did last time was to move it out 1 year, and we just went through what is the interpretation to that 1 year. That was option one as presented. So I believe what is on the table is the CIP with option one.
25, 26.
Okay, with a footnote that says, minute we have options and funding that match, we move forward.
Who's running that? I mean, they put up 1692.
Tenants.
Can you find ordinance 1692? We can put that up there, please.
Resolution.
Yeah,
Resolution.
at least from reading the motions in here, I don't like either one of these.
The resolution.
Yeah, not the stuff report.
Yeah, I don't see.
No, is that on there? We had the 1693. Is there?
Yes.
Okay. So we could remove. If it includes line of credit on that. Is that what you're stating?
Yeah, was that I think that the intent of the council was to not use a line of credit, was to find other sources of funding. And I think that we even can name them. One of them was King County Aquatics Grant. That's 4 of the 5 point whatever. And then perhaps just call the rest appropriation, something like that. So that we're not calling it a line of credit. And that's in the 1-pager on the CIP. For
The
center.
the new one. Oh, I see the 1693 then. You're running it more identifying what's potential.
Talking about this page.
Oh, I see. Just the project page.
Yeah, the project.
Oh, yeah, we
The
can.
1-pager.
Yeah, we can update that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that can be done.
So does that need a motion to change, or is that understood by picking option one?
I don't think the project page needs motion.
Well, so resolution 1692 includes the exhibit A, which is the previous original CIP as presented to
This thing,
council
yeah.
previously. Does not include option number one right now. Option number one just includes the language currently. I have it on my screen right here. That
Sure.
basically has a line that says grant
Drew, it does include option number one because the baby dinosaur from the previous meeting is still alive.
All right, lots of dinosaurs. I don't know, pterodactyls. Tyrannosaurs, it's about-
A lot of stories there.
So we could clean up that language, right? Grants or other undetermined community center funding sources to make it more concrete in terms of what we're pursuing.
Okay, but you did create a new sheet for option one.
Right now.
And
And that's why I'm worried that without it, that we have a version that says line of credit in it. And that's what's been shown. My thought would be if you amended your footnote comment to include a correction to the line of credit section of the. That makes sense. That's where you want to put that footnote anyway, is in the worksheet page of the document.
No, well, I understand what
the
you're
rest
after. I agree with both things you're doing, but I view them as separate things. One is the footnote that needs to be there.
No problem.
It says we're gonna move forward. Okay. Two, if we want to, that's a separate item, separate change. If we're gonna take line of credit out there and put grants and other fundings.
yeah,
We can do a motion to revise that one line from line of credit to say grants and other funding.
In that was, my understanding is that that's
Isn't it?
what we should do because it exists, as it exists and what you're looking at right now. It says line of credit. And if you want to change it while adopting it, then I think you should tell me to make that change, right?
Make the motion, young man.
this is what
Yes, that is the page that I'm talking about.
right, but does it show line of credit?
Yes.
So you're just stating you want,
I don't want to say line of credit if we don't mean that we want to take out a line of
this one
credit.
doesn't show line of credit though.
The one in the agenda packet does.
Oh, I see. So this is one that they'd handed out.
See that from the capital CIP.
Is that the correct option one? Councilor Watton?
All right. Well, I was the first one that was kind of resistant to this whole line of credit thing, especially being the banker again in the room. But again, it comes back to timing. And if we go to bond, which is going to be cheaper than a line of credit, if we go to bond, it will take us more time to do. It will take us a year, 18 months. Well, what is a year if what we're talking about is a bridge loan that would be replaced with a bond at some point, or with grants or other ways to mitigate? It costs us $150,000 a year or more, slightly more, for doing this line of credit that's been proposed. But in the meantime, that year on $28 million is going to cost us a heck of a lot more than the $150,000. And we've talked about the design build. We talked about it last August. And the reason why we were going through design build was this concept that we could have a fixed rate on what we are going to expect for the cost of the construction. Well, the more we delay this, the less valuable that design build option is. And that was the reason why we did this last August. So I guess I'm a little bit frustrated. And I'm not saying that, this is a done deal and that we've already chosen our partner. We are just trying to find a pathway forward. And I think that the more we delay this, the more it's going to cost us. And we are so close. So anyway, that's my concern there.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
So Mayor, in the handouts we were just given, there is one sheet, which was the top sheet that says it's just the 1 year delay option. Can we bring that up? Because this paper is what we're really approving. All the rest of it's just flowers. Okay, this is what we're approving. So at least this representation has the 1 year delay. I'm just curious of where the line of credit in here. Or is it not in here? in this
The
spreadsheet.
number one, it is not presented in option number one.
So this, I believe, is what we want to approve.
Mr. Johnson.
Would the worksheets be published alongside this as public facing documents? So I guess that's what we're calling this thing is the worksheets.
So this would be the starting point, and then we would go back and modify those CIP worksheets to reflect what we see in here.
Then I'm happy.
Those
We can move
those are
on.
working documents and changes the understanding goes. This is the official document and communication to county and state of what our intent is.
Right.
Then I don't need to worry about the worksheets. Then I'm happy and we can move on. I didn't make a motion.
Okay. Okay, so we have,
So I think the real intent of the original motion of putting option one is, in essence, to substitute this spreadsheet we just got handed out for the CIP that is in the agenda bill, which represents again 1 year, the option 1 year. And then there was a secondary to put another, got a lot of footnotes, but put another footnote in here that says, when we have a set of options and funding that match up, we'll move forward with the project. And if you want my chicken scratch, you can't have my $0 check, but you can have the chicken scratch of exactly what that footnote should be. I'm not emotionally attached to the envelope.
so do we have talked about there's resolution 1692 and then 1693. So were we going to, and 692, we had the footnote and the two resolutions. Mr. Johnson?
Well, I just think that resolution 1693, the only way to tack it on and make it part of the same vote would be to make it like an amendment to the motion, but it doesn't seem like it's an amendment to the motion that's on the table. So it seemed like, to me, it would make sense if we voted on the amendment to the original motion to approve option number one, then vote to approve option number one, and then separately have a motion for resolution 1693. That's what made sense in my head.
Okay.
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 So we're gonna vote on this one first.
Vote on the first. The baby dinosaur, which is
The first motion is approving resolution 1692 with the footnote.
We have to do the footnote first.
Footnote, which is approving option one with the footnote stating as soon as acceptable set of options and funding is secured, we'll move forward with this project.
Aye.
Right? Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
So one nay, voting, Councilor Watton voting against, and we have 5 ayes. And then the next is to approve resolution 1693,
We just did baby dinosaur.
the 92. Yeah, 1692. What?
Yes.
As revised.
As revised. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Well, so now I need discussion.
Okay.
How is 1693 different than 1692?
Councilor Johnson?
1693 is specifically fleshing out the language of the footnote that we just added to the non-utility capital improvement plan. The 1693 doesn't include the CIP at all. It's just a reference to one specific project.
Which is part of the CIP and already in it.
Which is part of the CIP, yes. It's specifically saying that for this part of the CIP, this is what we mean by we intend to move forward with this project as soon as we have the funding secured. And then it's a whole resolution that's just talking about that one project. So 1693, if we had only done 1693 and we hadn't done 1692, we would not have approved the CIP.
Councilor Christensen?
And 1693 is what kind of gives us a framework and gives our partners a framework of this is what we're planning to do. These are the reasons why, and gives a more specific statement that is not contained just in a footnote, right?
Counselor Washington?
And to add
Hutton.
to Councilmember Christensen's comment, it also, doesn't it help with securing funding is basically what we're looking for. Right? That the wording for securing the funding.
Right.
So
Mr. Washington?
I'm kind of lost in the soup and I just want to make sure swimming in the right direction here. So 1692 is adopting the overall CIP for the 2025, 2030 that we just adopted. Okay. And
Yeah.
the 1693 specifically is for the Community Expansion Center with the footnote. If I can say it that way, with the footnote we added.
92 has the footnote,
92 has the footnote.
right? And then in 1693, basically just pulls out the
Expansion,
capital
just the-
expansion project, right?
Okay.
Counselor Johnson?
I would think of 1693 as explaining in more detail, here's what we mean by the footnote.
Right. Any other discussion?
Just your.
That we would be voting,
It's redundant and I'm concerned, there's a habit of expansive interpretation of the written word. Okay, but I hear you, well, okay.
so we're approving, the first motion is to approve the resolution 1692 with footnote.
We did
No, we didn't take the vote.
Approve the
We-
footnote. You didn't
approved the
approve
footnote.
Oh,
with the footnote. Okay.
And that would be 1692, which approves the CIP.
Okay. Well, that's why I was confused,
All-
because we haven't approved the CIP with the footnote. Yeah,
Correct.
Right.
it's just the motion on the table.
That's right.
Okay.
All in favor of resolution 1692 with the footnote that we've already approved? Say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Counselor Watton, do you have a vote? Down on there? He's no longer online. Okay. Okay, so that's been approved by five have approved it. And the next is to approve resolution 1693. All in favor, say aye.
Hang on.
Oh,
There.
Counselor Johnson.
I don't think that the motion is actually on the table. We didn't actually make the motion. I believe that the chair is supposed to make the motion since it's part of the whole document. If I'm not mistaken.
Motion to approve resolution 1693 approving the community center expansion phase 1, what?
With the change. So first of all, you said, yeah, did the motion and then who was second?
Evans, he interrupted
We
me.
stopped for.
Yeah,
Okay.
we stopped for the.
Our state attorney, laid hand.
Okay.
for the council.
So 1693, I think there was some discussion earlier that perhaps we needed to refine the language for 1693. Which we can try to do tonight, or we could bring it back at the next meeting or the next committee meeting. I don't know. There's some current language in 1693 that, if I recall, is potentially problematic with the design build contracting process. Scroll down to it so that I have it in front of me.
The last. So just remove
Yeah, section three
93%
um
funding.
is the piece that I would recommend deleting.
Point of information
Counselor Johnson.
from legal counsel, is that the only line, or does the administration need to go back through and just make sure that it's all good? Or is that the only line
Well,
that's problematic?
I appreciate the question. I think section 2 was what was talked about as maybe needing some additional wordsmithing based on recommendations from the folks from the Y and other discussions earlier tonight about what is intended by the footnote. I'm not sure section 2 is currently drafted, captures everyone's input. Maybe you're fine with it and it does. I don't know. I didn't. But so that's, I think, up to you, whether you want to try to work through section 2 tonight or leave it as is, if it accurately reflects the council's intent. So that's what we're doing with 1693 is capturing the council's intent for purposes of trying to better the chances of obtaining the funding that's currently missing.
So it seems like some simple fixes. So if we remove section 3. And then we'll seek remaining funding and we'll begin construction.
I'm not sure it's really accurate to say that we'll begin construction upon closing the funding gap. You'll still have to have a contract finalized with the guaranteed maximum price. There's other things that would have to be done to actually authorize construction beyond just finding some money.
Yeah, so,
Mayor
sure, go ahead.
Councilor Washington.
I think it should go back.
Yeah.
There
Yeah,
are some
let's do it.
definitional things that need to be discussed there.
I didn't read it all the way in, so it's not in yet. So if we want to go back to FNA, we go back to FNA. Yeah.
Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I think that we have something that does amend the CIP as it is. I do not think that that is sufficient to cover everything. So I do very much support the spirit behind 1693, but it may not be ready for prime time. So I think, yeah.
Okay, so we do not have a motion for that one, so we will bring it back to FNA and then back to council at the next council meeting. That sound fine? Right,
And you
Great.
haven't approved CIP, so you're.
right.
We got that far.
We're great.
CIP's approved with the footnote. So anybody needs to move forward, move forward.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for your work
All right.
on this. Okay, moving on.
That was working.
Yes, it's good though. So next is the utility rate study and schedule and 2025 to 2030 utilities capital improvement plan. I wonder if we should take like a 5-minute break. We've been going since 6 o'clock. Soon would.
That's a
5-minute
good
break?
idea.
My backside
Is that a
was
motion or is that a motion, Madam Mayor?
We're just gonna go for it.
It's okay.
5-minute break.
Not object.
We were coming back from a break and now we're gonna do the introduction of the utility rate study and schedule and 2025 to 2030 utilities capital improvement plan. We have Dylan Gamble, our CIP manager, who will provide information.
Good evening. I am excited to bring back a PowerPoint that you very recently seen.
It shows.
Good start.
I hope you're ready.
Already start with a joke. That's what.
Okay. I'll let this catch up with me. It's 3 slides, so that quick. First and foremost, this is the same presentation the FCS group gave before. It's just this 3 slides are at the very bottom of that slideshow. I emailed a copy of this all to you, so you can feel free to take a look at it when it's not 9 o'clock at night. So I will move real quickly, but the general idea here is that as you just looked at the non-utility rate study, non-utility CIP. This is the utility CIP. We have 3 of them, and I'd like to just call out kind of the structure, but it's the same idea. We're going to look at a 6-year span. This is our capital projects. What's different about these is that we will be following our system plans. So we have 3 system plans to go with our 3 utilities, and they have outlined a very long runway for us on how to achieve a successful, safe, accommodating utility that accounts for growth as we've given our designers of that system plan the authority to do. And what this reflects is the kind of capital projects that are required to get there. So some of the big call outs that I feel like are important for the water capital here. In all 3 of the utilities, you're going to see utility mains drainage. That's that standard project we're already working on, mains. There's a lot of old water mains in the city, so we're kind of cruising through that. Then you'll see a bunch of projects in the pressure conversion zone. This is where we're kind of changing our elevation in the city. Either we're moving water up, and so we need to booster pump it up, and that's where you'll see booster pumps, or changing the pressure. Either we're taking it down, and so we're making sure that we don't blow all of our water mains at a different elevation based on where our booster pumps are. And kind of taking all that in big pictures perspective is we're also working on projects that would add water access for us in the summertime. So then you'll see that as the not Canyon Springs, source of supply improvements. That's where we're looking at an aquifer recharge program, if you've heard that term. And that's a big project out there. And a lot of our improvements to well fields and moving of water are related to our ability to successfully recharge that aquifer and have draw rate on it later. So what you'll see is that a lot of the projects are kind of sketched out in the future because they depend on other things successfully moving along. The last bit is that what you'll see in a lot of these utilities is that they have development that is critical for the project to move forward. In Sergey's presentation, he called it something called CAICs, or you might call them kayaks, pronouncing acronyms. That is essentially when a developer gives you something as part of their development to the utility. So you'll see that in all sorts of utilities, but that's essentially part of the developer's payment to join the utility. It's the cost of connecting. You also hear GFCs. So those two things happen out in the future with the development. As Sergey called out, we're not anticipating growth until 2026, and then it's increasing from there. We're really looking at the mill site as a big component of that. And so we're anticipating the timing of that. We move the projects to accommodate that. And so you'll see that here. And I just kicked us over to the sewer, a big one. And the way to read this is that you have basically 4 projects, and it's a bunch of little things that go on inside of them. Just kind of like our programs that we have, as you've heard, programs described. And this one's no different. So at the very bottom, you're seeing Class A. A lot of that is that reclaimed storage project that we've discussed up on the ridge, the Class A reservoir. And so you'll see pretty big numbers tied there. The other aspect is you heard Sergey discussing the water reclamation facility that we call WRF3. That's going on as well. That's that middle tier one. Lift station improvements are kind of how we move things around. That's a pretty big project. And then sewer mains, pretty extensive there. The projects are very intensive. Big call out for you is that there's a bit of remaining funding to cover the 384th Newton Street work that we discussed in previous council meetings. It's just out here. And I want to jump over to our last one, stormwater. The big call out on the stormwater one is Sandy Cove. A quick update is that we're almost certainly at this point not likely to get the permits in time to start construction this summer, which means we're getting the permits prepared. They last for several years, and we'll be seeking construction as early as we can, given the fish window, all the criteria for the permit for next year. So what you see there is a correction for that construction timing. So you see that Sandy Cove is all out on 2025 with corrected numbers for the year. And then there's a couple of projects that are casted out, and what we did on our end, these are not new projects. What we did is we tried to smooth them so we didn't have huge spikes of cost. And that was really a product of people anticipating the timing for stormwater capital improvements 4 or 5 years ago when they would have generated the last version of this. So that is a very quick, and honestly, I'm glossing over a lot of things there. However, I would just like to call out that if you're wanting a deep dive on any one of these, almost every single project in here has a worksheet from the past CIP that was adopted. This is just really carrying those numbers in the future. Timing for escalation of costs, as we have heard about the utility mains and replacement. Urban forestry, same thing, that program that we replaced the street trees up on the ridge. And then the projects, we went and reviewed the system plans to make sure that we could delay appropriately for the ones that we did slightly nudge out. And then the rest is following councilmatic decisions with delaying certain water projects in conjunction with the WRF3 project. That was part of those agenda bills. And so that's captured here as well. And that is the 3 different CIPs for the utilities in a very quick succession. I'm happy to answer questions, go into detail on any one of the specifics, or ask other people to jump in for me. I know that was very fast and a little bit breezy, and I'm happy to come back and go into further detail if that's what you need.
But can we have conversations about Parks and Public Works?
Absolutely. Yeah. Would you like me to set a reoccurring, or at least the next one?
God, no, the next one.
It is, yeah. Oh, okay. The next one I will bring a specific CIP for the utilities review. We'll just be looking at this chart again, essentially, and going into a deeper dive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Okay, Councilor Johnson?
Just on the Sandy Cove Park, the temporary stopgap that we did, to kind of stop the city from falling into the river. Is that still going to last through at least one more winter? Is that projected to survive at least that long?
Yeah. We wanted to. That is the intent.
Okay.
As we've always tried to explain, the river has a lot of potential for chaos in a sense that we can't predict. But we modeled this to survive a few winters in hopes that we would only be using one winter to stopgap. We're now at two. We're anticipating two. We're hopeful that we will be getting going next year without any sort of loss of our temporary structure. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Dylan. Is there any finance and administration report? Committee report?
No report.
All right. So I'll have just a couple quick mirrors update. First of all, we had a fantastic 4th of July celebration. We really appreciate the Snoqualmie Ridge ROA and the church on the ridge, and all the different sponsors that put it on, as well as there's a lot of city staff that also helped make that successful. So we had like our police, our fire, our Parks and Public Works group, our community liaison, and many other employees that were behind the scenes. So it was a lot of fun. I think it was very well attended by residents and also people from outside the city. North Bend and Snoqualmie, we're going to start or begin the discussions regarding the police services agreement this month. Correct. Yes, so we will start having conversations there. We have 2 police officers that will be graduating from the police academy this week. It was William Natka and Kobe Hoyla. So they will be graduating on Thursday. We received notice of applications. So Echo Glen is in the process of permitting for the construction of the perimeter fence of their campus. So that's great news. And K4C elected official workshop session on July 16th. Is anyone planning to attend or have any interest in that? That one's like located there. Okay, so you have all the information. Okay, great. So next, commission and committee reports. I think Councilmember Christensen, you sent out an email regarding SCA and the asylee.
I did. Yeah, so PIC is meeting this Wednesday to talk about the position statements, the accommodation principles, as well as the statement. If anybody would like to weigh in, I'm happy to report those comments back. Basically, we've been seeing an increasing number of asylum seekers to our area, and several of the cities that are nearby, including Tipples and SeaTac and Kent, are bearing significant unplanned costs and public service impacts. And so they have proposed, they being the SCA, some principles and a statement that they'd like reviewed. So if you have anything to add on that, please go ahead and let me know by Wednesday, or if you want to talk about it now, I'm happy to talk about it now.
I think it's more about having elected leaders, consulting with elected leaders before they send people to your city, and then you are required to find places for them, and also make sure that there's local services available. And the concern is with asylum seekers, at times it could take years before they can ever receive any type of, I guess, approval, so they can actually work and pay rent and things like that. So it's right. So it's just kind of an overall process. They're raising a flag saying we need some help, and so asking locals and cities and state and federal government to help. So any other commission and committee liaison reports? Councilor Cotton?
Or do you forgot?
No, it's okay, go ahead.
I have from the last SCA public health briefing, which was in June. Just so you guys know that Dr. Jeff Duchenne, the health officer, is resigning. He was the one that kind of brought us through the King County, the COVID pandemic. Due to his work, King County had the lowest death rate in the country for COVID-19. They're in the hiring process now. We still have the King County General Fund $35 million shortage, 25 million in public health, which is funded through the general funds. Their Harborview, the UW and Public Health is working together to keep the public health clinics running. And so there is going to be a Harborview tax, coming out of all this to help with the funding and stuff. So more news on that. It should be set by September. There's an opioid buprenorphine hotline now, just started, just launched for King County. It's through the UW. It's a telemed to help treat opioid use, to decrease dependency and withdrawal. So that information's on the public health dashboard. And lastly, just an interesting fact, bird flu is back. It's mutated again and is crossing species now. The avian H1N1, which is highly pathogenic, is mutated. First, it is now crossed over to cattle. So dairy cows specifically have been affected in Wisconsin and let's see where else. Minnesota. And now it is transmitting to the dairy workers. So it's crossed again over into humans. So that's not a fun fact. Just wanted to let you guys know, like if anybody is hanging around the dairy farm, to be aware of that. And Arts Commission, July 20th, Saturday, is the plein air event going on. It's been separated now from Snoqualmie Days, so it's being its own event now. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other things going on that day as well. So, and some new artists have brought in some ideas for the new banners. So they're reviewing that and they're really good.
Nice.
I can't say more.
Very good.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments? These are reports. Okay. Get a brief report from our city administrator.
So our top social media posts, splash pad update. The Snoqualmie ice cream store reopening. And Big Truck Day photos. We did have Big Truck Day last month. It was a big success. Sorry, it's late. I had to. Fire department had 140 calls in June. Human Resources is working on backfilling some internal promotions. You may have seen the email. Phil Bennett is now the newly minted Assistant Director of Parks and Public Works. As of today, Jason Battles is the newly minted Stormwater and Urban Forestry Supervisor. And then there's recruitments running in IT, community development, and police currently. Check the website if you wish to apply. And then Parks and Public Works is working hard to get everything squared away. It's summer, it's the busy season. There have been some delays. One of them would be mowing. Our vendor's having a hard time working through his business license process. So as soon as we get him that business license, he'll be out on the street mowing our right of ways. And then the police department had, I can't tell. There's too many different things here. They had 582 calls for service, which is down from the previous year.
No.
I'll stop there.
All right. So next item is we have executive sessions, but I think we need to extend The meeting past 10. Is there a motion to extend the meeting?
So moved.
There is second. Moved by Councilor Johnson, second by Councilor Christensen to extend the meeting past 10. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? It's unanimous. All right. Okay, so we have executive session. So we, executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)(I). Litigation has been specifically threatened to which the agency, the governing body, or member acting in official capacity is or is likely to become a party, or litigation that the agency reasonably believes may be commenced by or against the agency, governing body or member, or litigation or legal risks of a proposed action or current practice that the agency has identified when public discussion of litigation or legal risks is likely to result in adverse legal or financial consequence. Lasting 35 minutes. And those attending will be include City Attorney David Linehan, City Administrator Mike Chambliss, Finance Director Drew Bate, Police Chief Brian Lynch. And then we also have a closed session pursuant to RCW 42.30.140(4)(B) for planning or adoption of a strategy or position to be taken during the course of any collaboration, bargaining proceedings, or reviewing the proposals made in the negotiations of proceedings, lasting approximately.
I think we can get all this done by 10.
2 minutes.
Be done by 10.
2 minutes. So we hope that to be completed by 10 p.m.
Yeah.
So that is their goal. So there may be a motion following this, and so possible action may be taken after executive session. So we will come back out and then possibly take action and then close the meeting at that point. So we will need to pause the meeting and we will be back by 10 p.m. Okay, we are now back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it is now 10 p.m. and we have returned from our executive and closed session. And council, we have a motion to authorize increase in contract amount for Pacific Law Group in the amount of $50,000.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Johnson, second by Councilor Christensen. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the motion passes. The next motion is to approve settlement with Nigel Draveling dated June 26, 2024. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Christensen, second by Councilor Johnson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those that approve, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? And it's unanimous to approve that. Council, hearing that there's no further business to come before the council, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Christensen. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? And we are adjourned.